Good morning, everyone. We will call to order this workshop of the School Board of Manatee County, February 24th, 2023. And look forward to today's workshop. Got a lot of good stuff going on. We do have an agenda amendment that I want to read real quick. The chair has found good cause to amend the agenda to include all items listed under agenda amendments on the February 24th, 2023 agenda, updated on February 21st, 2023, and posted to the district website, manateeschools.net. And the agenda amendment was just adding the presentation that you'll see today. We didn't have a chance to do that before we put up the agenda, so we made those amendments and attached them. Going to move on to public comments. There is no one previously signed up for public comment, and no one has come in before the start of the meeting for public comment. So we will move through public comment and jump right into our workshop items. So first one is the Arts Village update. That's Dr. Breslin and Mr. Bowman. So come on down. The floor is yours. I will say, board, we'll have them present. Or let me ask you this: what do you guys? Do you want questions during, or wait till after? What do you prefer?
Thank you. So for the Arts Millage, it is a rather short presentation. So if we could go through these slides and then hold any questions at the end.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Does that sound good? So good morning. Happy Friday to everyone. Good morning, Mrs. Saunders. I want to introduce Mr. Bowman, who has been working with the arts plan from the inception and has done a tremendous job with his team. And he will take us through the slides, and then we'll open for questions. Mr. Bowman?
Thank you, Dr. Breslin. Chairman Choate, Ms. Saunders, School Board, thank you very much for inviting us here today to give you a update on the Arts Millage. So it's really exciting to be here and tell you guys all about the awesome things that are going on with our visual and performing arts programs and our teachers. This report really is 2 years in the making. The Arts Task Force, which had been in existence prior to this discussion, started meeting in January 2 years ago to start the process of asking the board to add the arts to the 1 mil referendum. And once they did that, which we were incredibly excited about, to expand and support our arts programs, we then began working on the implementation plan. And so then this is the first year that the 1 mil has supported the arts. And this is a presentation of the passage, planning, and implementation so far. So this year we have $2.5 million dedicated to the arts, which is the first time for the 1 mil. To keep track of the funding and make sure we were allocating it appropriately, we broke it down into 3 different parts. Part 1 is funding that goes directly to the schools to be spent by the schools through their teachers and their normal bookkeeping process. We call these school supports, which is almost the majority of the funding. We didn't want to just send out a blanket amount to each school. You'll get $20,000. We wanted to try to make it a little more fair than that, and so we created the funding formula, which takes into account each school's socioeconomic disadvantage percentage. Plus, we added a Title I adjustment if they were designated a Title I. We combine those two together, and then we multiply that by the allocation. So that allocation gives us our adjusted allocation rate. And then we would multiply that by how many students are in the building for elementary. So for elementary, it's every student in the building is multiplied by the application or the allocation. For secondary schools, not every student is in a visual and performing arts course, so then we went down to the teacher level, and so each teacher was given an allocation based off how many students they taught. So we did a projection before the school year began so we could get the ball rolling with funding, and then after the 10-day count, we made an adjustment. So that's how all of the funds were distributed in Part 1. For Part 2, which is our large purchases, the district requested teachers to request instruments, equipment, supplemental curriculum, auditorium upgrades, to us directly, so then we can compile those into large purchase orders. It increases our buying power. A lot of time with vendors, if the order is a certain amount, you get free shipping or you get another 5, 10, 15% off the order. And so we've been trying to really stretch our dollars as far as we can, and we are working through all of those funds. You can see the graph on the right, which shows you our projected disbursements. So a big chunk of that is going to be going directly towards our auditoriums, our performance area upgrades, our elementary art and music equipment, and our secondary art and music equipment. Moving on to part 3, these are ongoing requests that teachers can make when they come up to an event that they would like to attend. If they want their students to be a part of an art competition, a lot of those cost money. So they can request funds for transportation, for entry fees, or special projects. A special project would be an after-school club or a school-wide event that they want to put on and need some extra funding for. Transportation is a huge portion of that because most of our transportation is taken care of by charter buses. And that has been a huge blessing to be able to provide funding for our students to be able to go to events and not ask them to pay for their own transportation. So our slogan is your arts millage funds at work, and these are new and exciting opportunities for our students, including transportation and tickets. You can see a picture there of students going to a musical performance. We have art shows that are going on where we can support all students participating in the art show, where before it may have been just a grade per year. After school clubs, we have a student there from Rogers Garden where they got to do an after school club and they got to learn how to use tie-dye and make a t-shirt. We have new opportunities and experiences for teachers, professional development. It's been such an exciting thing to go to conferences and see so many of our teachers there, and they're able to tell other teachers around the state that our county paid for our hotel, our registration, our transportation, and I didn't have to pay out of pocket, which they usually would have to do, or if they had a booster organization previously, they would pay for it. And that's a huge bonus for us. I mean, it starts talking about the benefits of teaching in Manatee County. We also are able to send them to individualized PD. There's a teacher there, a picture there of teachers going to a clay workshop, and then many of you were at the Arts Rise and Shine leadership breakfast earlier, where we were able to bring in Professor Livingston for a few days to work with our teachers, our district staff, and be able to present to all of our principals. Ongoing opportunities for experiences in arts leadership. Of course, the Arts Task Force has been incredibly influential in the process. It hasn't been just me coming up with all this stuff. For 2 years, the Arts Task Force has been very involved, and I want to recognize Mary Glass for being here. She's been a big part of that and helping oversee that. They are our vehicle for providing financial accountability, where we report what we've been spending, long-term planning and guidance, and they provide community involvement so that the community can report back what they're seeing and what they would like to see. The Manatee Arts Education Council is our main advocacy organization, and they provide additional funding for our honor ensembles, grant opportunities for teachers, and additional fundraising opportunities, which teachers can always be involved in. Oh, real quick, we do have on March 27th Arts Alive coming up, which I hope you can all attend. I think you received that invite. That's at the Grove, and will feature many of our district performing groups, artwork, and we'll also be honoring community leaders. So it's March 27th. So again, continuing on with Arts Millage Funds at Work, first thing I wanted to do was thank our community. So we created thank you for supporting the arts posters, which we sent out to all schools to post outside of their events. So hopefully you've seen those. If you went to a performance or an art show, that banner would be at the front of the school thanking the community for supporting the arts through the 1 mil. We also have a huge recruiting initiative to get more students into visual and performing arts. So we created posters and flyers that go out to all of our schools, elementary, middle, and high, to get more students involved in the awesome classes that we have in our buildings. And we also created the Why Teach Manatee flyer, which you all received a copy of, and we were able to present at the Florida Music Educators Association Conference, which talks about really the exciting things going on in Manatee County. And when teachers found out that you guys have funds that I can use to buy supplies and equipment and go to professional development, and I don't have to sell 1,000 candy bars, it's like, yes, we do, and we're very excited, and we have lots of resumes if we have positions open where we can fund and we can make some awesome hires. It's also just about spreading the good news. You know, we need to spread. That's the one thing I know as a music teacher before I wasn't the best at, was promoting what I was doing, and so I wanted to make sure that we promote all the awesome things our teachers do every day, because they get so involved in their job, they just don't think about the PR aspect, and so we're trying to help them out with that. A big part of the mill was to expand our programs, and so Manatee Elementary, Lee Middle School, and Bayshore High School were all designated as Arts Magnet programs, so they were supported with additional funds to help create, promote, and bolster their art programming. We have been supporting those schools throughout the year with hiring teachers, with helping with curriculum, and with helping purchases to make sure their programs have top-notch stuff. This also includes, you see a picture of the Hot Band Day there at USF. We had Bayshore and Southeast and Palmetto attend, which for some of them was the first time because we were able to pay for their bus to go. And as you can see, there's hundreds of kids on the field there, which is an experience that some of them would never have in their regular programs. We also were able to have a men's chorus this year where we brought schools all together at Manatee High. So we had 100 young men come and be a part of a men's chorus just for Manatee County. This year is the first year that all middle school elective registration sheets will now include band, choir, orchestra, and art. So we're very excited about that. And with the help of the Arts Task Force and district administration, we'll identify schools where there is a significant interest to start determining additional positions for those schools so that we can keep expanding those programs. So very excited about that, but that will be based off of student interest. We also were able to support the increase of our curriculum team. So our new VPA curriculum specialist, Rhea Skaggs, which I believe many of you have met, she's been hard at work supporting all of our teachers in many different areas, and currently is overseeing, today is what we call our VPA Roadshow. So we have over 22 performances going on throughout the county where high schools go out, they perform at a middle school or an elementary to promote the visual and performing arts. And so I want to also thank our principals for being very receptive and accommodating of that and trying to get the word out about what we have going on in our secondary programs. We also brought on Ms. Burton to help out as our Arts Millage accountant to help manage all these funds, but she does many more things besides budget transfers. She does professional development every day for a lot of our new bookkeepers to help them with processes, and we're very thankful to have them. So continuing on, another just really exciting project is what we're calling Bradenton Reads, a community unites around literacy through the arts. This has been a growing partnership between Gene Farmer, who is the new public art coordinator for the city of Bradenton, and Mayor Gene Brown, who has been a really enthusiastic supporter of this initiative. This began with just a simple conversation of how do we get a student on our public art advisory board, and so we were able to have a Manatee High School student join their board, and so they meet once a month and they get to talk about where public art goes in the CRA. And then that developed into another conversation was I kept seeing these banners on this Main Street and Village of the Arts and on the Riverwalk, and I'm like, how do I get student artwork on those banners instead of it just being a generic statement of Riverwalk or something? And so we started that discussion, and then that turned into, well, we really need to improve literacy in these areas. So how do we combine the power of the arts with literacy to create change around our three CRA districts, which is Manatee Elementary, Rogers Garden, and Daughtry Elementary. So that kind of turned into, as art is a major driver of change, we're going to utilize the talent of our local artists and our students who are committed and passionate about educating our young children to develop literacy skills that will last a lifetime. So working with funding through the Arts Millage and through other grant opportunities, the goal is to create student artwork that promotes literacy through banner installations throughout the CRA. So the hope is that you can start at the Riverwalk, walk through downtown, through the Village of the Arts, and see all student artwork through our K-12, featuring K-12 public art from our schools. We would have story walks, which have a picture there, artwork. So basically they take a book and then they illustrate it, because it's sometimes getting students to read, they need a little more incentive than just opening up the book. So the art is the incentive to get to the book. And with a grant we're applying for, we're hoping that we're able to have a QR code, which parents could scan, and then that would be able to read the book to them in multiple languages. So we get rid of the language barrier that sometimes happens with literacy. Plus, we know that repetition helps when it comes to learning to read, and so we're hoping that people go back to these again. Hey, I want to go see that book again. I want to see those pictures again. This would the finale event would be an art fest, which would be downtown Bradenton, which would feature student art, student performances, all based around getting excited about literacy in our primary grades. So I'm really excited to be here. I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them for you.
Great. I think we'll just go around and see if there's any questions. Ms. Messenger? I'll start the other way next time.
That's always me. Yeah, I had a few questions. You had said that in the beginning of the presentation, I think it was on this slide with the,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you were talking about the funding that goes to the schools, and that there was a Title I adjustment.
Yes,
What does
ma'am.
that mean?
So if we had, for example, if a school had 50% socioeconomic disadvantage, so that 50% was the starting point, and then if they were a Title I, we added another quarter of a point, so then that would go up to 75%.
Okay. I was trying to discern whether that Title I adjustment meant it going up or down, because Title I typically gets additional funding, so I didn't know if you were accounting for it. I didn't know which way you were accounting for it. That was really my question. So.
Going up, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate the middle school registration. I know that was something that, we'd kind of gotten some concerns about with high school teachers, so I'm really excited about that, and I really do hope that students say, oh, I'd really like to take this, even if it's not there, and we can find ways to add more units that way.
Absolutely.
So I love that, and I really appreciate you doing that. I also really appreciate the City of Bradenton, this work here, this Arts Millage piece. Mainly because, and I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, but you know how much arts facilitates academic success.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes that gets missed. So I really appreciate this. And I could imagine if I could scan the QR code and my kids could hear the book, we'd be going to that park every weekend. So make it a book that I also enjoy, because I think I'll be hearing it a lot. But I love that idea, and I could really see enjoyment in that, and something that a family can do together. And And that, I agree with you, encourages literacy, and that's the point. I wanted to stress that I really appreciate that. You know, they go together, right? That integration leads to deeper learning. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. I did want to, if I could, real quick mention.
Yeah.
I didn't go through it in my presentation, but I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Halpin with our early learning. She's been very involved in Soarin' 4, and so when we talk about books, those are the books that we're targeting. So they're already in the process of they've either been seen or they're going to be distributed, and so that we're coordinating. It's not going to be something new and random, but it's something that the kids can be like, oh, I saw that here, and now I'm seeing it there.
Right, I could see that, and there's value in that too, because they will probably have an idea of what are the most appropriate books for those younger ages as well. And there's a Soarin' 4 next Wednesday. You talked about an art fest, and I love that idea. There used to be Art Slam. What happened to Art Slam? I mean, that was kid-driven also. I mean, there was a lot of different kids things. There were student performances. There were schools that were there doing different activities. I mean, like, we went several years in a row, and it was a really meaningful, worthwhile event.
Yeah, I participated as well.
Yeah.
As a school teacher. That's through, I believe, Realize Bradenton. And that stopped with COVID. And I believe, well, I'm not sure if they're bringing it back or not, but we will be coordinating with them as well. They're a part of the partner. The list of partners is quite extensive.
I'm sure. So if you were to do something like Art Fest, which I love that idea, I think that's, when we'd go, it was packed with families and kids, and they were experiencing different art that they may not experience in their classroom, which I'm hoping now with this, they are experiencing more of those in their classrooms. But it was nice because they got to experience different kinds of art, and the families got to participate with their child. So I think there was a lot of value in that. Will it be like that, or will it be different than that?
I'd say it'd be similar, but it would be really driven by what we have going on in the schools. So our students performing, our students doing the presentations, the activities.
Okay.
But yeah, it would be definitely on Main Street, kind of like it was, with the stage. I mean, that's the hope. And then we have performances going on, but everything has to tie back to how is this improving literacy?
Exactly.
And what are the activities through art that improve literacy? What are the performances through art that improve literacy?
And I know our weakness isn't math academically in Manatee County, thanks to, I think, certain programs that have really helped, but there's a lot of math in art as well. I mean, music is math. I mean, there's a lot of that, so there's a lot of academics in art on both pieces, that are typical. There was one other thing. This was really a more specific thing, and it was about the funding, once again, up in the front. And I had a teacher that reached out, and it was they were asking about scripts, and I don't really understand that process because that's not anything I ever did. But, they kind of said, well, I can buy, in order to have the script reviewed, they had to buy a copy themselves. But to buy that, in order for it to get approved so that the millage funds would pay for it, it had to be approved, but they had to pay for it before it could get approved so that it could get reviewed. And there was that piece where they would have to then purchase it either through the school or that person was purchasing it themselves, I think, through their own money, so that it could get reviewed, so that it could then get used in the school. And then the millage dollars might pay for, as I guess the license, I assume you have to buy multiple licenses. I don't know how that works. Then it got paid for, but they would have to front it, basically. Is there a way to fine tune that?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that specific instance, but if that, when we do get scripts that are turned into the media specialist at the district, for whatever reason, because the school has a question, I mean, publishers generally provide one PDF, so we can review the entire thing. They provide that for free upon request. So I'm not sure about that specific instance, but that's usually the process, is that reach out to the publisher, ask them for a PDF. It's usually like a lockdown, with a password and everything, because they don't want us to just print it. But then that's how we can review it, and then we say, you know, you can purchase.
Okay, thank you.
So if you ever have a teacher reach out again, please, you know, send them my way, and I'll do everything I can to help.
I think I tried to do that. I think I did. I think I forwarded it. I don't know if
Okay.
it made it to you or if it made it to Dr. Breslin but I know I did pass that along
Okay.
to ensure that was responded to, but I just wanted to understand it better because if that's happening to one, I don't want it to happen to other. I don't want teachers to have to, I mean, like as a teacher, I spent $750 in my classroom every single year,
Yeah.
right? I don't really want teachers to have to do that if they don't have to. That's ridiculous, right?
Absolutely.
So anytime we can fund it, I'd rather fund it than having the teacher have to do that.
Right.
And so
Yep.
I was just curious. I appreciate it. Thank you. That was all my questions.
Okay. Ms. Brown?
Oh, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, couple of questions, of course. First, can this presentation be sent to the CFOG? Would that be something that they would be able to review? I'd like them to see that.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like this
Look at it.
presentation be forwarded to that committee so they can look at that because this is part of the millage.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe they get everything we have. I mean, as far as
Right.
funding and how it was spent and all.
Right, so this would give them, okay, this is where you're gonna start looking at where this money was spent and so forth. This would be great for them, I think. How many students participate in the different art programs across the district? I'm just curious how many students we have that,
Well, we're very thankful that every elementary has music and art. So, I mean, thousands.
Thousands, okay.
And then secondary, I mean, it's not.
yeah,
It's
I know,
not
yeah,
100%, but-
that level I get, but like middle and high school,
I mean, it's thousands. I can send you specific numbers from our course counts because we pull everything, and then I have band, choir, orchestra, theater, dance, art, but it's.
Right, like
It's quite-
performances, how many, like, plays or whatever, are there performances that they
There are
do?
hundreds
I'm
of
sure,
performances.
Yeah, and that's the thing, we're not like you said, advertising that. I don't.
Well, one thing I did not
know.
mention in the presentation is that we do have, for the first time, our own page on the website.
Okay,
So we are in development of a visual and performing arts calendar.
All
So
right.
the first draft is up, and so schools submit all their events, and we've been putting them up there. With the new website that rolled out in January, I mean, that's been a whole thing. But we've been working on that so that we do have a place where they can go manateeschools.net/arts, and they can see our public performance and art calendar.
and on the chart, the graph, art, sheet music, art supplies, equipment, that kind of thing, is that musical instruments as well, I'm
Absolutely,
guessing?
yeah.
Okay, and, any student can participate in this. If their reading levels are way down, then we'll encourage them to be involved in the arts to potentially bring their reading scores up. Am I?
Well, in elementary, they do,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
When it gets into secondary, it gets a little more
little more
complicated with
complicated, isn't it?
remediation and their course, choices. But that's the whole plan with the recruiting campaign, is to get those fifth grade students excited about joining the visual and performing arts, so when they are in sixth grade, they're in something. Because that's usually where we lose them. If we don't get them from fifth to sixth, we don't get them back.
Right.
And then, so that's where we're really trying to hit our fifth graders with materials and videos so that they can be excited about joining those courses.
I think this reading, Bradenton Read Things is an excellent idea. How many parks have I gone through that, I'm just not only at downtown Bradenton, perhaps in our county parks, this would be
Yeah.
kind of expand to that. It's simply because I've been to parks in other counties and there are children's artworks that, and gives a description of what it's about. And it may be about the solar system in a certain park, it may be about another area of interest at another area of the park, but kids make these little things.
Yeah, it disappeared, the presentation, but on that slide, on the map, you can kind of see little green
Yeah.
bubbles. Those are areas that are identified by the CRA as public art spaces, which
Okay.
include our 3 elementaries. And so all of those are potential sites where we would have some sort of installation, which would then every 3 months change out to a new book. So it wouldn't just be one book forever, but it would be one book for a certain amount of time, and then we would be able to rotate. And so then the hope is that we have a library of these books that go to our schools and the parks, and they switch around. It's really, these storyboard things are pretty
Yeah.
cool how they work.
Yeah, I think it's great. I like that illustration, is really cute with those children. And arts is, when you go to the fair and you see all of the artwork that is displayed by students, and there's some pretty good stuff there. And then you go to an art gallery and you see things there, and it's almost, wow, our students' arts could almost be in this gallery. I'm not kidding. I've seen some pretty good stuff at those, at the fair. Do we do anything about promoting a student gallery? I'm just throwing that out there for an idea.
No, well, since you mentioned it, Art Center Manatee, we've had an ongoing partnership with them, and so we do have a school district showcase.
Okay, I
which
did
is
not know
in,
that.
April, and that we have, I believe it's April 5th, but I can get you the exact date when we have our opening night reception. And so this is, the goal this year is to have all of our schools represented, because they have over 300 spots. Last year we had almost 200 submissions. This year I'm really hoping that we get every school to participate, and so that will be a 2-week event where student artwork is in a professional gallery, and then we also do a presentation where judges give out awards for K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12.
Okay.
They're a great partner.
Okay. I just, it's like, wow, these kids are talented.
Absolutely.
These kids are super talented, it's like.
And if you
I
want to
would
buy
almost
some of that
buy and
artwork,
frame it,
you want to buy some of it, come to Arts Alive and you can
So,
bid.
there you go. Okay. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Foreman?
Okay. Thank you for everything you're doing. It's pretty amazing, some of the things that are going on. As far as what, right now, what's going on with middle school registration, or getting kids into the middle school arts, what is being offered to all of them, and then is there anything special being offered to different schools?
Well, we're making sure that band, choir, orchestra, and art are on every sheet, and Mr. Clark, through his office, is verifying that all the registration sheets have those. Now, some schools do offer a dance class or a theater class, so they would also add those to their sheets.
How about digital art?
Absolutely, yes.
That-
Lots of schools have a digital art and CTE. They're kind of, we hold them together. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So we have a few middle schools that have digital art programs.
Okay. And then in secondary, other than, I assume every school has choir, orchestra, and band. Is that correct?
Yes. They have classes for them. I wouldn't say they have full programs, but they have, some schools have a class of choir or a class of orchestra. So we're hoping to expand those.
Okay, do you have, because obviously band and orchestra are two different
Very different.
things, very different. Do you have, does every school, every high school have a band, a separate choir, a separate orchestra? Thank you.
They do not all have individual teachers for those subjects, but we're, hoping, and that would be really a goal at some point, is through the students starting in the middle school, building up those programs, which is really our #1 focus, that then over time it would bolster our high school programs so that we could increase staff. It really just, it's about student interest and numbers.
Okay. What's your goal? What year? I'm gonna hold you to it.
Well, it'd be great by the end of this round, you know, of the mill, and by the end of the third year to be able to say, like, we have these things. You know, I think we'll make great progress, and then hopefully with the next round of the mill, we get to be able to continue on the mission, because it's important, I believe, to all of our students to be able to have access to these programs.
For the budget next year, how many additional teachers in the arts are you anticipating requesting?
It's really hard to say. It really will be driven by these elective registrations when they come in. We are having a meeting in late March to discuss all of that after registrations are in. So I'm hoping, you know, hoping it's a lot. And that's why we're really pushing now to make sure kids are aware. A lot of them just don't know, like, oh, I didn't know I could take that. Yes, we have these programs, and we want you to sign up and you know, find out where the interest is, because all the schools are different. Some things are really popular at some schools, and some things are just not. So we don't. It's not just a blanket answer, but trying to individualize and working with principals, because facility is also very important.
Okay. I assume then that you're doing the same registration drive for students, for the 8th graders going into high school?
Absolutely, yeah.
And what special, like, do we have guitar? Do we have pottery? Do we have, you know, some special things going on?
Some schools offer, we're really focusing on the core. I think I've talked about this before, making sure that the core, our big four, band, choir, orchestra, art, is fully staffed. And then, you know, from choir, we have musical theater, you know, and then from dance, and those are things that are hopefully, you know, we can keep expanding, and that's the direction we would go. Most of our high schools have theater and dance. A couple of our middle schools do have teachers. Usually it's like a band director has a guitar class, or orchestra teacher has a guitar class. We don't have necessarily dedicated guitar programs for one teacher, but those guitar classes are always popular, and so they help out those teachers, and they usually share equipment.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about what summer programs in the arts that you have going on? I think you mentioned it once before.
So it's not paid for by the mill, but really excited that this year is the first year we're going to have arts camps through the ESSER funds that you guys recently approved. And so we're working on those. So we'll have a dedicated band, choir, orchestra, theater, dance, and an art camp, which will be able to serve hundreds of students. And we're currently working on finalizing those locations so that we can start advertising and getting kids into those programs. So that's going to be, I think, a game changer as far as getting those elementary kids into, because it's for rising sixth. So students going into 6th grade, get them excited about, hey, I've never been in choir, but I'm going to check it out, and then I'm going to be in the summer choir camp, and now I'm going to sign up for it when I go to middle school. And we're going to have those taught by our teachers and led by our teachers in our buildings.
So they're going to be able to change their registration if they're coming into 6th grade. It's not final in the spring, what they're going to be doing next fall.
Well, I think that's
Do you want me to?
sure.
And so the way that scheduling works for our rising 6th graders is they do have a little more flexibility when they're looking at their selections. You know, for instance, Hale Middle School, when they enter 6th grade, they will visit the different elective classrooms before they make their final selection, so students understand what they're choosing. So there is flexibility for that particular group of students to a point, you know, but there is some flexibility there.
But only at Hale.
No, not at Hale.
Okay.
Other middle school. I was just using that as one
Okay,
example.
okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bowman.
Oh, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm a big fan of the arts, actually. One of my favorite movie quotes is from the Dead Poets Society, where Robin Williams has all those boys in the room at the beginning of the school year, and he says, "Gather around, boys, let me tell you something. science, engineering, law, and medicine, these things are necessary to sustain life, but art, poetry, music, romance, these are the things that make life worth living. So I'm a big fan. And I'm actually, I think I've said this before, but I'm pursuing an advanced degree in the humanities, and we actually had to take a music course. Actually, it was a visual performing arts course in the pursuit of truth. And so, you know that the music that goes like this, dun da 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 da, dun da 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 da, dun da 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 da. And I'd always grown up thinking that was like a theme to commercials, like some commercial music writer had written that, right? So I'm,
Charge part.
yeah, the charge, you know. And so I'm sitting there and I'm watching one of Wagner's operas, and all of a sudden I hear dun da 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 da, dun da da da, and I was like, that's from an opera, right? It's called The Flight of the Valkyrie, and there are these spirits that take people off to the. But the point is, it's good to be culturally knowledgeable too, and it helps our improvement. And actually, I won't tell the whole story, but I was in France as a 21-year-old, and I was sitting in a church thinking I was really cultured. Actually, this is a good story to tell and make people laugh. So I'm sitting in a church, and I'd gone over there on a French exchange program with the Air Force Academy, and I was actually a humanities major, right? So I'm sitting in the church watching a concert by Vivaldi. I'd never heard of Vivaldi before, but I thought, I'm sophisticated. I'll go watch this Vivaldi concert because I'm a humanities major at college. And so I sit down, and these four people come out on stage, and they start playing the Four Seasons, right? Dun, 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 dun. I'm like, I'm sitting there watching, and it goes on for about 45 minutes, and we take a little break, and then we come back. And I know how concerts work. You have an opening group, and then the main group or the main singer comes on stage. So we sit back down, and it's these same four people up there. I'm like, when's this Vivaldi guy going to come out and play? So I look at the guy next to me, literally like where Mr. Dye is sitting. In whatever pidgin French I had at the time, I said, excuse me, sir, can you tell me when Mr. Vivaldi's going to play tonight? And he looked back at me and smiled, and he said, I am sorry, monsieur, but he cannot play tonight. I said, why not? And he smiled back at me and he said, because he is dead. And I said, how long has he been dead? About 270 years. So we should study this stuff, and it should be part of our education, so we're cultured people and we don't make fools of ourselves like I did in Paris that day, and reinforce the idea those Americans, they are uncultured. So yes, I'm a big fan. I would like I have a favor to ask of you though, and that would be that when we put up the art and stuff from the school system, that we kind of make sure that it follows some of our policies on political topics. Let's say that, you know, we had the recent controversy down at the public library, if you remember that, with a display that was down there. And so I just asked that we make sure that you guys look at that art. I mean, and we don't want to have those kind of controversies, number one, because it's probably against our policies here at the school board, and number two, it hurts our ability to promote the arts within the community when it comes time to renew the millage. We don't want people to go, well, I saw this up on the art from the school, and that'll just hurt our overall ability to promote arts as part of the millage. So
Absolutely. Every piece of artwork that goes up in a frame I put up is vetted. I mean, I look at it. Sometimes I have Dr. Breslin check it out too if I have questions, and we try to. And I always tell our teachers, you have to make sure whatever you submit for me to put up, if a kindergartner is looking at it, what are they going to say?
yeah.
That's kind of the litmus test. I mean, for me, and so anything on the 5th floor or here on the 1st floor or any of the galleries, that's what we try to do.
And I just like to make the point that to me, patriotism is just something that if there's artwork out there and we can encourage that, I think that's a good idea.
Absolutely.
I would just like us to avoid the issue that they had down at the public library, not have to go down that road and
Yep.
have to explain that to the public. So that's my ask of you. Thank you very much. I'm glad you're promoting this, and like I said, I'm a big fan. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just got a couple things. Just one, thank you for what you're doing. It's great. I've been at Arts Live. What was the breakfast one again? What's that one called?
Arts Rise and Shine.
Art Rise and Shine. That's right, because it is early. And that was great though this time. With the speaker was phenomenal. I mean, the only negative, he walked around everywhere, and I just had to keep turning. But other than that, he was fantastic. I'm I love music. I love I didn't necessarily do it and pursue it. I can play the guitar, and that sort of stuff. But I love music, and I believe that in education we've got to have a rounded education for all of our kids. And I think that arts and the visual arts and the performing arts brings kids to learn, because not everybody just wants to pick up a book and read. There's got to be some interest in it, right? And so I believe that this is a way to attract kids to say, hey, I'll go to first and second period because I want to go third period and do my pottery or whatever, right? Some of the things I just want to make sure, especially with some of the new board members, explain a little bit about the council, just in the sense of the role that the council plays in this, right? So obviously the council has been an advocate for a long time for the arts. We got it in the mill, and now what is your role when, and I mean really who's involved, who are the people that are involved in that, and to make sure that we know the X amount of people involved. I don't know how many are actually in the council, that they're at least we're doing our due diligence of going to every school, seeing what's going on, so that you guys can then make the decisions on how to spend the money best for those schools. And I don't know if you necessarily talked about the council itself and how that kind of derives and how that happens.
You want to talk about the task force, or?
Sure, absolutely. So the task force started, as you know, before we began, before I came to the district, this task force started. I came in summer of 22 and was asked to join the task force at that time with our deputy superintendent, Mr. Bowman, Mary Glass, and some prominent members of the arts community. And with the idea of, we're hoping that we receive these funds, we're going to plan that we are going to receive the funds, and then how will we use those funds to support education as a whole. And so as you see that tie into the literacy, that would not happen with this group that we have developed over these 3 years. Has it been in development, or 4?
I want to say it was in a year before.
Okay.
3.
So 3 years, because that allows us to network, reach out, and form these partnerships so that we end up with a community impact for our families. We initially were meeting on a monthly basis. We have peeled back a little bit on that monthly. We met last month. We'll meet again we didn't meet this month. We'll meet again in another month. And we look at how are our programs doing. Let's look at the arts calendar. Let's look at student enrollment. Let's look at the monies. Are we spending appropriately? How can we capitalize on those who have already achieved in other districts through arts programs? What are they doing? Because we don't have to recreate something if it's already been done well somewhere else. And then Mr. Bowman and team, they pull the data. How's attendance looking? What does discipline look like? Because we feel it's very important when we come back to share not only how the money's been spent, but how is it related to enrollment and student achievement overall. And student achievement, yes, is tied to literacy and math, but it's also tied to, is it improving overall for schools where we're flourishing and in the arts, or is attendance up? We feel very strongly that the research says strong arts programs does promote a positive swing in attendance, but we want to document that here as well. And so that's another task that we're doing with that group. Anything I'm missing?
We do add members as members leave. We add. So recently we asked Vernon Desir, the Manatee Memorial Foundation, to join, and that's been a huge gain for us to gain his perspective. So we are, adding community members to make sure that it's not always the same people saying the same thing.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, and I'll get to you. I just want to make sure that, and the reason why I asked that is because this wasn't. I mean, this is something that is well formed, well thought out. How are we going to pursue making sure that we build arts program back to I really think what they once were. And I know Lee Middle School was mentioned there. I know Lee I had a cousin that went there specifically because of the orchestra. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that, and the public understands that this isn't just, hey, we're asking money, we're going to buy a bunch of trombones and baritones. That we're doing this in a calculated way, and there's folks dedicated to this, and it's not just, hey, here's a report on what we're spending, but that there is people behind the scenes in the thought process. Yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, how many members are there on the council?
I want to say there's 10.
Okay,
It's district leadership, and then community members, foundations.
okay.
Couple things too, couple more questions. One, just looking at like this, the school support, the supplies and things like that. Just really talking about the sheet music. Is that all accessible to every school? I mean, is it, I don't even know. Is it digital? I'm assuming it is. But when you purchase something, let's say at Lakewood Ranch High School, does Braden River have access to that same material?
A lot of schools share.
Okay.
I know that, a lot of times, even me when I was a teacher, I know that a band played this piece last year, and so I would ask them if I could borrow it.
Gotcha.
To try to save some money. And I know that they use the interlibrary loan
Okay.
to do all that sort of stuff. It's not necessarily on a list, but they all do communicate to make sure they're not buying the same thing. We don't have 7 copies in the district.
And I think that I think the approach to the council, obviously the council is much more educated on what's going on inside the schools and the arts than I am. But I completely agree with the approach that we're taking, the foundational stuff, make sure the equipment's there, things like that. And then now let's move towards getting kids excited about it from 5th grade going to 6th grade. And letting them know that the options are there. We can't just say, hey, let's hire a teacher, and then nobody shows up, and now what do you do? So I love the approach. A question I have about the registration. Obviously, being a teacher, I've gone through them when you pass them out, and you talk to your kids, hey, you should be doing this or that. And in the elementary level, or maybe as a do we have someone in the district, it may not be every single teacher, 5th grade teacher, because that may be hard, but do we have somebody advocating during registration time to go into schools, and maybe it's all the 5th grade, and we're talking about, hey, we know this school mainly goes to Hale, here the programs are there, and maybe someone from Hale come in. I want to say, I vaguely remember being a 5th grader that may have happened or may not have happened. Are we doing that, though? More so than just them seeing it on a list, right?
Well, one part of that is, thankfully in elementary, we have the specials where the kids get music and art on a rotation. And so those teachers are a big piece of that puzzle, and providing them with the tools to present the options and talk to them and say, hey guys, when you get ready for course registration, which will be coming up soon, you think about your options. If you have questions, let me know. We also have all of those school visits that are currently occurring. And so we do have lots of elementaries that have said, yes, come in, I'll get all my 5th graders together, and we'll have a group perform, and we'll talk about those options.
Awesome.
And that's what Rhea Skaggs is working on today.
Good.
She's on those visits with the schools.
Good. I mean, I think it's important because,
Right.
I just did registration for my daughter for junior year. So it's a lot, and you're
is.
figuring stuff
Yes.
out. And so I just want to make sure that we are in there reiterating that it's there and they're the programs rather than just having on a list. Last thing, just a couple other questions. How did for the magnet programs, how did we come about saying Manatee, Lee, Bayshore is our schools? How did that process fit out instead of any other school that was out there? Just out of curiosity.
Those were recommended by Ms. Saunders.
Okay.
And I think it goes back to the history you have at Lee.
Absolutely.
Which a very vibrant, rich program. We have, it still has a great arts program. Has it been publicized like it used to be? Not as much. So starting with that, let's build up what we know has been a huge success, and then feed into Bayshore. And I'm sorry, Mrs. Saunders.
No. That's really how the secondary were selected. Once upon a time, Bayshore was recognized for having a robust arts magnet program, Bayshore High, and Lee Middle School as well. They had a grant that had made it an arts magnet. That grant had expired, so the funding had not continued, but that's why those two were selected, because in the past, they had been designated as such. Our elementary school, in our traditional elementary schools, that once upon a time was an elementary magnet, was Rowlett. Once it converted to a charter, we had never designated a specific elementary school. The reason Manatee was picked is because we only have 2 elementary schools with an auditorium. We have Manatee and we had Ballard. The reason Manatee was picked is it had more student space available in case students wanted to choice into that school for those particular programs. So that's how Manatee Elementary was selected for that.
Great.
And we are working on renovating one of their rooms into a dedicated dance room, so they'll have music, dance, theater, and art, all at their school.
And that was my next question was, I see that on your pie chart that you've got performance area upgrades like 8%. That I'm assuming is the rooms, the auditoriums, things like that, right? I would say, are we using any arts, physical things like that into our capital plan as of now?
No.
The only thing we're doing with the millage money that's designated for the arts is buying equipment or supplies. If there has to be any construction type renovation, it has to be done with capital dollars. So it's not paid out of the millage part. But the equipment, the uniforms, things of that, a teacher, it can be bought out of the millage.
So as we move forward in our budgeting here in the next several months and we get the capital budget in front of us, is that something the council is going to approach us and say, and I would challenge you, if not, let's do that, because we can't have, I'm not saying we can't, let me rephrase that. We can have great performances in bad locations, of course, but the sound, the lighting, the presence of the stage, all those things come into obviously the performance side of it. So I want to make sure that we're not, that they're all, the students are able to, because the production part of it is just as much, right? So, again, this is to me going back to something that I'm big on in workforce readiness, right? This is something that a kid can go through elementary, middle, high school, and come out and they know that I've done a production XYZ at how many years, etc., and go right and get a job doing this. And so I think it's important for us to make sure, especially those 3 magnets. I mean, I'd probably start there, to be honest, but all of the schools need to make sure that everything is there ready for them to have a great performance.
Absolutely. And Mr. Choate, that work has started with Lee and Bayshore, and I don't want to speak for the team. It's not our lane, but I know that they have plans for Lee, plans for Bayshore that they'll present with their team.
Well, I believe it's already in the plan, the capital plan. This year was to get Manatee Elementary ready to go. We've had assessments for light installation, sound upgrade, refurbishing the stage, and then redoing one of their non-used rooms to a dance studio. Then next year is to focus on Lee, and then the year after that is to look at Bayshore. So Mr. Rinaldi and I have been working on that, and so yeah, I mean, that's not part of Arts Millage, but yes, that's a whole nother piece of, we are working on that.
Good. That's good to hear. And last thing I just have is for the Bradenton Reads. I think it's fantastic. Thank you to the city to be with us on that. To Ms. Spray's point, right when I read it, I said, that's fantastic. What about let's do this, do it big, right? Sometimes you get the vision of like, oh, big, let's go to the county, let's go to all the parks. Because I do remember as a kid, Bray, as you would pull into Bray, remember they had those, I don't know what the program was, and somebody maybe help me out, but they had those big murals, right? Yes. And it wasn't all the time. It was like during the second half of the year, I think. And it was on like a theme or whatever.
Even King Middle. And
yeah. So every school had every school would have it. I think it was middle school, elementary, high school, and it would work its way as you drove in.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that in a long time. And so that just got me when you brought up the city, but I do like, let's start small. Let's get it right. Let's get it working. And then you can move to.
We're hoping that this becomes a model that we can duplicate. And that's where the city has been really excited about partnering, and, you know, especially with our schools in that area that need extra support. It's like, yes, let's focus there. They have a public art coordinator. They have the public art advisory board. They have some things already set in place, and Mayor Brown is really excited, and he's got the Boys and Girls Club that's involved and all of that. So focusing there, doing something, then be able to say like, hey, Lakewood Ranch, Palmetto, let's look at trying to do these things
Public parks, yeah.
in a bigger scale.
That's awesome. And I guess lastly too, and I know ever since I've gotten on the board, I've advocated for this. I don't think we do a good job, and some have already said it. I don't think we do a good job of advocating for ourselves. We're in education. We worry about education. We're not, and we have done a fantastic job recently. Really, really pushing the great things that are happening in this district. And but it does come down to, you talked about the calendar, it does come down to each individual teacher at the school. You gotta work it up, right? You gotta let everybody know, here's what we're doing, here's our calendar. So I would just like to encourage, and hopefully I'm sure you are, and the council is, encourage teachers to, you gotta communicate back to us, and then we gotta communicate back to Mr. Barber's group to say, let's push this out there, right? Like, Palmetto's doing a performance on, XYZ. Let's put it on Facebook. Let's get it out there. And I think that's extremely important, is the advocacy part, because it's not our lane, right? We're in education, and sometimes we don't pat our back enough.
The calendar is a big piece of that, making sure that is up to date, getting all those dates from the schools in the correct format. And then we are excited that MSTV now has the ability to live stream. And so, in the future, we can live stream some of those events.
Yeah.
Right.
Just one thing, do we ever partner with Manatee Players and have any students participate in any of their productions at all?
Yeah.
Do we? Okay, I did not know that either. So.
I went and saw Newsies, and there's a lot of our kids.
Okay,
were in it.
all right,
That was
yeah.
a couple years ago.
I don't get time for the arts, as you can tell, I don't get time for the arts too much.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Any other questions?
I do actually.
Yeah.
Something you talked about in the last few minutes was intriguing to me, that somehow you were trying to correlate attendance and maybe reading improvement with participation in the arts. Have we actually done any of that work? Do we have any data yet, or are we just kind of?
So we have data that we looked at last year from students in the arts versus students not in the arts programs. At the end of this year, we will run it again and have that ready, and it'll be part of our ongoing progress monitoring that we do. And in addition to the monies, how is it affecting the overall school?
Is there a reading correlation too that you were trying to put together?
So we did. So originally, when the task force came together, there was a lot of research. What does the research say about arts programs in a K-12 education environment? And using that, we were able to argue that we need to be able to fund the arts. And so yes, that is part of the plan, is to tie in. Let's look at test data. Let's look at attendance. Let's look at behavior. So all of that will be part of the work we do this summer, and seeing where we are, and then we'll continue. So we have ongoing progress monitoring on what it looks like in the data as well.
Because if we can show that, it's very hard to look at the millage money and go, well, what effect is it having? Well,
Sure.
people are happier, and people are being paid more. Okay, that's kind of vague, but if you actually have good data that has some correlation with it, that could show attendance is higher for people that perform in the arts, and that's actually helping improving our reading scores a little bit, that would be solid evidence, so to speak, or data.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yeah.
One last question. I just went to our website, and where is this calendar you're referring to?
So it's under curriculum. So if you go to curriculum, and then there's a tab for visual and performing arts, and then on that page, If you scroll down, you'll see the calendar.
Would it be more user-friendly to have, because I'm looking at the department's directory, to have an arts department?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I would not think to
Oh.
look under curriculum.
I second. I would never have looked under
We
curriculum
could
under
talk
that.
to Mr. Hanson and his team as to where it would fit best on the website.
I think too, looking at the website now too, obviously we have a calendar that puts our stuff up there. Of course, we can't put 60 schools' performances
Yeah.
in every day, but could we potentially embed it in that calendar? Like for instance, when you look at, and these are just ideas. I'm not the tech person to do this, but I'm just pulling up February and it says Citizens Financial Oversight Committee. Can we have another February 1st? Can we have February 1st. So could you have another link right below it that says art calendar or art performances? They click on that and then it brings it to the calendar that says, oh, Tillman's doing this, right? So, I mean, that may be just to make it a little bit easier because naturally I'm going to look at the calendar to see if there's anything on the calendar.
Right. I mean, I have no objection to that. I need to talk to Mr. Hanson and his team because I don't want to say we can do
Sure,
X, Y, Z,
sure.
and I don't know
It's
the
just a
new
thought.
website platform as well. But I think it's a good suggestion.
Or putting it, printable academic calendars, I know that it's obviously not going to be in the very beginning of the year. They don't know what they're sometimes doing, but maybe there's a tab right there that
Accessible there.
it's attached to those calendars.
We'll look into that.
A link to the calendar in
Yeah.
multiple places. I mean, yeah, makes sense to me.
Great.
Good suggestion.
Awesome. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank all of you.
Absolutely. Before we get to the strategic plan update, I'm going to take a quick recess, 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
We are ready to get back to work. Number 2 on our day here, strategic plan update by Mr. Chapman. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. I am here to give you an update on our strategic plan. Yes, it was approved in late October, early November, but it started and really, the work began in spring of last year, and so we use 6 months because we're saying August 1st. The beginning of school till now is 6 months, and where we are with the strategic plan. So I have a quick little video to show you to kind of refresh your memory about what this strategic plan is and how it's laid out. So I think MSTV has that ready to go, and we'll play that real quick here.
This week, the School Board of Manatee County approved our new 4-year strategic plan, titled Ready 2026. Building on our previous strategic plan, this new plan lays out the detailed work ahead as we look to improve early learning and grade level reading, prepare our students for graduation and life after school, and position our school district for a competitive job market and the incredible growth we are experiencing here in Manatee County. This is the strategic plan in action. I'm here at McNeil Elementary, where we all know that a quality education begins with reading. In fact, kids who read proficiently by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate high school. In coordination with our community partners, we are doubling our efforts and heavily concentrating on early learning and grade level reading in this new strategic plan. As our students matriculate through school, we must prepare them for life after graduation through career and technical programs like this robotic and animatronics program at NOLA Middle School. Through the use of the 1 mil referendum dollars, students are learning firsthand the skills that will bring them success in the future. Manatee County leads the state in these innovative and imaginative programs as we look to expand them in this new strategic plan. We must keep up with the increased growth we are experiencing in Manatee County, so the school district is rapidly modernizing and building new schools. In addition, as the labor market becomes more and more competitive, the district must keep up with this fast-paced market so that we have a workforce for the future. By focusing on these core areas, ready to learn, ready for life, and ready to grow, we are Ready 2026.
Actually Buffalo Creek. If you think about it, 6 months ago, look what it is now. It's pretty unbelievable. But and that kind of shows you, that video shows you the 3 areas that this plan is split up in. The Ready to Learn, which is really focusing on that, really pre-K through 3 grades and really focusing on that. And Dr. Breslin's going to come up here and kind of give you an update on where we are on all of that. Then the Ready for Life section, which is really then that secondary area is then preparing our students for life. Well, first preparing them for graduation, but then preparing them for life after graduation, whether that's college or vocation or technical school or the military, preparing them for that. And then that Ready to Grow section, which is really making sure that our district is doing what you just saw and what you've been at lately, like last night at Sugg Middle School, is modernizing our schools, is making sure that our recruiting and retention is running effectively, our salary schedules, and preparing for that growth that is rapidly happening out east with new schools and purchasing land and all the things that you're seeing in that board work. That is in that Ready to Grow section. So. And a lot's happened in this last 6 months. Of some of these new initiatives. We've got Guy Harvey. We expanded dual language. Our SORN 4 has grown. We've got our community partnership school at Daughtry growing. Matter of fact, this week, we delivered what will then become the MCR Health Clinic at Daughtry. Those modulars, as Joe Rinaldi would teach me, are now being put on the cement and the hookups there at Daughtry. You obviously just heard about arts integration, what's happened in the last 6 months, and then also our new and rapidly expanding community partnerships on early literacy, specifically attacking that early literacy. And then when you talk about district-wide, you've heard about many of our safety and security enhancements. Our financials are healthy. We're obviously providing more and more mental health training and resources to our students and staff. We've created more family resources and supports. We've developed new ways to communicate to our families and to our parents. IT is rapidly making sure that all our schools are installed with state-of-the-art technology. I think Mr. Hanson reported we're almost done with digitizing all of our records. We've got a handful of schools left, which is a huge undertaking. I know Mr. Wagner's going to talk about our new employee health clinic that will be ready by August for the new school year. We've got new electric buses coming our way, and we've got, as you've all have been, either dedications of new buildings or new renovations of schools, and also the opposite, groundbreakings with shovels in the ground. So there's a lot that's happened in the last 6 months. So what we thought we'd do is have Dr. Breslin come up and kind of give you an update on where we are with that Ready to Learn section, where we are with our academics, and then Mr. Wagner coming up and talking about where we are with operations, with our CTE, ACT, and MTC programs, and then I'm waiting in the wings to answer questions and things as we go along. But again, I want to remind you, this is at the 6-month level. You'll hear from Dr. Breslin kind of where we are with new standards and all of that, and metrics and the state, and so that I think will answer some of your questions on that. And then, like we've said in previous workshops and meetings, we'll come back at the end of the school year in the summer, early summer or at some point, and take a look at the plan and how we finished it this school year, and then start to put in those metrics and goals for the next school year. And as you all know, we're going through a superintendent search as well. So when that new leader comes, working with that person with this plan and with you all, and adjusting as we go there too. So there's a lot certainly at the end of the school year this summer to dive into this plan, but right now we're going to give you that review right now. So I'm going to ask Dr. Breslin, our Executive Director of Curriculum, to come up, and we'll start the conversation. And Mr. Chair, how you want to run the...
I think if we break it up, do your presentation, and then we'll ask some questions about that portion, and then we'll move to the next part, and then ask questions. I think that'd be, by the way, we're going back and forth to different folks. So
Sounds great. It is a bit lengthier than the arts presentation, but thank you for having us here today. We do have a lot to share, and a lot of things I'll go over for the future that I appreciate your feedback and thoughts on as we work to support our schools. The part I'm going to start with will really take us through slide 18. So you'll probably see that the first slide, slide 3, is where I'll spend probably the most time, and then it'll get a little bit faster, so I don't want you worried that if I'm going to take that long on every slide. And then at slide 18, I think is a good stopping point for the questions before Mr. Wagner comes up to present. It's tiny print, but we have a lot we want to share that has been accomplished this 6 months, kind of a temperature check to see where we are, where we note that we need to improve, and how we plan to make those improvements. And so if we look at the first number 1 here, we've kind of combined our metrics here. So metric 1 and 5, you'll see professional development related specifically to foundational literacy skills. And as you know, as you've heard me say, since last year, going into this year, the heavy lift of the best standards. Happy for the changes. We were all excited about the best standards. We do think the state has the right approach, and so we're excited about the direction the state is going. The heavy lift is making sure our teachers are familiar and comfortable with resources and familiar and comfortable with the standards. And so there has been a lot of professional development. And that professional development not only focused on how to use the resources, but specific pedagogy. What is the best practice for each resource? How do we look at that foundational literacy skills when we look at the science of reading, explicit instruction, decoding, phonological awareness, really digging in to that early literacy. And you'll see here on this slide the K-3 focus, and that's where a lot of our community partnerships have come into play. We are very blessed with the partnerships with United Way, with Early Bird, with the Florida State's program on their screener, and you'll see that as well that we have started to identify students who might have struggles in reading. When we work with these partners, it's not a matter of just going out and saying, please come visit our schools. We spend a tremendous amount of time working together in what is the best way to work with our schools so that they understand what we're trying to accomplish. So we're working as true partners and not conflicting or stepping on each other. You'll see the target increase to the Big 10 schools, but we also have support for all of our elementary schools because we have struggling readers at every school. And so that's where our literacy coaches come in. And in addition to that, the state has done a really nice job in providing a lot of opportunities for literacy development, literacy PD, for both teachers, coaches, school administrators. And so we have been working to identify those that should attend those PD sessions and then come back and bring the information to our district. And that involves working with all of our reading coaches to make sure they have those necessary tools they need to support their schools. What you'll see here on this slide is that PM1 to PM2 scale score. And so the PM is Progress Monitoring 1, which we took at the very start of school, and then Progress Monitoring 2, which for our district we took in December. That window went through January, but we went ahead and tested in December for that progress monitoring. As you know, we also did our benchmarks as well. And the reason for that is this year in particular, we won't know until the end of legislation, May 5th, how the cut scores are going to be laid out. And so we're making educated assumptions on scoring and looking at specific data the state has provided, but we don't have as much access yet. So that benchmark was very important this year, so we could zero down on the standard while we wait for the state to release more information. And so I'll talk about our benchmark data as well and talk about math as well, but this slide in particular is our literacy. You'll see PM1 to PM2 scale score growth. Okay, so that's our overall as a district, how we're growing. You can see math. So that's not proficiency level, that's growth. And so you can see math at 72%, ELA at 56%. We are outperforming the state in math. We love that we're outperforming the state in math. We want to be outperforming in ELA as well. And so we'll talk about how we plan to do that, because that is our goal. When you get into metrics 3, 4, and 5, again, there's a tremendous amount of information on here, but I want to point out the MTSS. That's the multi-tiered system of support. Of course, we implemented Focus this year as a support for both academic and behavior support. That involved a lot of training related to what interventions work best with our struggling learners, and then how we monitor those interventions and to make sure that they are working. We found through our progress monitoring that we're seeing in elementary and secondary growth. Our level 1 students are progressing. They are moving forward. You may not see them at that proficiency level yet, but we're seeing very positive outcomes. And I'm speaking of specifically to ELA. We did see that some of our level 3s in ELA weren't making that that same growth that we want to see. So great, we're putting all these interventions in for our struggling readers, but at the same time, we want our students who are proficient to keep that proficiency moving along. And we saw some stuttering there. So what do? Well, that's why we have our data. We use it to drive our instruction. And so working with our principals and our assistant principals, we've sat and we've looked at, here are the standards that show that students are struggling. Here's some tools and resources to use to reteach those standards. And for our administrators, here's how it looks in the classroom when you're walking in. The standards are new to our teachers, but they're also new to our school leaders. And although we see very positive data and a lot of points, part of our job is to teach administrators, when I'm talking about reading across genres, what does that mean? How is that measured? And then how does that look when you see students practicing that standard in the classroom? And so we've been digging in January and February. We had a principal meeting this week where we talked about, when you walk in, what does the student task look like? When we talk about engagement, what exactly does that mean? And we truly believe in focusing on that tier 1, that stutter we saw through PM1 to PM2 with some of our level 3 proficient readers. We're going to be able to lift those students back up before they take that end of year assessment. And so looking at, again, the last 6 months and some of our screening tools.
Do you want?
Can we go to slide 18? Because some of this, you're going to see a little bit of repetition and stacking. And so if we could hold it to slide 18, I think I might answer some of those. And so I mentioned on the first slide about the early bird screener and how we're using that to really look for characteristics in our students that might lead to some struggles in reading comprehension. That doesn't involve just a screener. That involves a whole series of professional development for our teachers and administrators. And so not only are we looking to say, you know, what students might be having some difficulty, but how do we respond to that? And so that's a huge piece. And then, as I mentioned on the other slide, we're also partnering with the Florida Department of Education, with FCRR, and Learning Ally, with a program that comes out of Florida State University. As a Gator, I was a little hesitant, but it is a phenomenal program that they're starting. The same thing, to screen early learners, to make sure that we're able to identify at the beginning of their education what might be some areas of concern, and we can address those right away. We don't want to wait till 3rd grade to address it. We want to address it as they enter school. And so that screener is happening at the elementary schools listed on here. And then when we talk about that PM1 proficiency, and so this is the proficiency of our students, this is particular to K2. Now K2, for the first time, is screened by our state. We have not done this before. And you can see all of K2, the proficiency level of students. And so to go back to what this assessment means, it's a comprehensive assessment. So essentially what they're taking when they walk in the door in August assesses their mastery of standards for their entire grade level. Same idea when they go PM2, same idea when they go PM3. So your proficiency to proficiency rating. And you can see the increase we're seeing with that K2 in both math and ELA. And then of course we look at subgroup data as well to make sure that our supports, for example, with our Ls, with our students with disabilities, are meeting the needs of our students. And then we also break it down into levels, and we really dissect it by standards to make sure we're supporting our students. Now K2, ELA, those resources rolled out a year ago. So they're now on their 2nd year because the state rolled out K2 ELA a year early before everyone else. And I think there's an advantage there when you're more familiar with the resources and the maps and able to do what you need to support the students. So looking at the next slide, we're talking now about the accelerated coursework. So our job is to make sure we support all students, and that includes our students who are exceeding the grade level standards. And so we brought in this year, for the first time, accelerated learning into our elementary schools. Of course, we've had it for middle, we've had it for high school with great success, and now we've added it to middle school. The state, with the best standards, released those additional math courses that we brought into 3rd and 4th grade. And so students in 3rd grade accelerated, receive the entire 3rd grade year in math and half of 4th grade. 4th grade, they receive the other half of 4th grade, all of 5th grade, and next year we will have 5th grade students sitting in 6th grade math, which is for the first time ever. I'm a parent of a 3rd grader. I personally have seen my son flourish with this added rigor for his math. It worked well for him. But again, there was careful consideration, lots of conversation. We want to make sure we're putting students at that early age in an area that they can succeed. We need to consider both their academic performance and just their overall well-being as a child to make sure that they're ready for that accelerated work. It is extra work on the student moving at that accelerated pace. So we're looking at that data, and we're looking at enrollment, and we are seeing the benefit of those students who continue to earn those high scores with their math. We are doing the same thing in ELA. You'll see the difference of enrollment. It looks like ELA has a higher percentage of students enrolled. That's only because 5th grade, due to the skipping of standards, we held our 5th grade and 5th grade standards only this year. We didn't want to put them in a situation where they were trying to master 2 years of standards. Not fair to the student, not fair to the teacher. And so you'll see that increase next year when we roll in. One of the benefits that I think those before me in my position under Mrs. Saunders' leadership brought in was that really great progress monitoring for math. And when I say that, I'm talking about our work with athletics and students taking regular short assessments, receiving feedback, sometimes regrouping based on the data to really hit the students' needs. And because of that way of work, our math performance is exceeding the state. It is phenomenal. And so to have that for ELA, this year, my husband works for Tropicana. When they do a new product, they have a multi-phased approach because sales can't accommodate this much in year 1. They can do this much and they grow. So same thing with our ELA. We have this year was let's learn the standards, let's look at the maps, make sure everything is working with our resources, identify supplemental resources as needed. Year 2, we need to develop the same kind of system we used for math that our district has benefited on. And so looking at that same format, we're building common assessments to put in next year that teachers can use to really target instruction more so than just a 3 times a year assessment. So that's one of the things we're looking to improve year 2. If you look at strategy 2, it has with our gifted students. Mrs. Foreman, I'm going to grab this.
Go ahead.
Okay. Increasing our programs for our gifted students and our talented students. You'll see the work going in there, and that is run by our ESE department with Nikki Cox, but we have done a lot of work with her this year to make sure our resources are supporting those students. And we had a parent night just recently, just last night. Seems like further ago, but it was just an ESE resource fair. And with that, it's for all students. And so we had plenty of resources for our students. It was very well attended at MTC, lots of community partnerships. But again, it just speaks to the support we have in supporting all learners. And so looking at slide 6, this speaks to our new teachers. And so one of the things that we find that we need that perhaps has decreased some of our ability to move forward was just some consistency. And that is the amount of new teachers we've had to bring in, one, because of growth. Two, of course, we know we lost some teachers who maybe left the profession or retired during COVID. And so supporting new teachers so that they stay with us is very important to us. We cannot bring teachers in, spend time training, and then have them not stay in that classroom that following year. So we are tracking with HR, our new teachers, how many are being retained, what can we do to support the new teachers. It's very overwhelming to come in as a new teacher. I still remember doing that 22 years ago, and having so much on you that first year. So how do we identify, working with HR, here's what's really important to affect the student level, and here's how we can add a mentor to the teacher, which is something we increased this year. So our teachers have an on-site mentor, so we retain our teachers. All of this feeds into student learning. All of that affects student learning. Our instructional coaches, you can see we have 21 elementary coaches across 19 schools and 10 secondary coaches. You'll see that's a blend of math and reading, which is, you're like, why do you have 21 at 19 schools? And so you'll have a blend there. Classroom walkthrough tools, specifically for literacy instruction. Those are not to evaluate teachers. Those are so that we can walk in and measure the learning. The state released a walkthrough tool this year, specifically related to literacy. And so we've been working with our administrators on this tool. When I talk about, as I mentioned earlier, reading across genres, well, what does that mean? And so you can look specifically at the standard, and you can see what that student activity should look like in order to meet that standard. This has gone a long way in equipping all of our school leaders to become instructional leaders on their campus and support our teachers. We do have a coaching academy, so there's receiving specific PD. And then the UF, thankfully, University of Florida is involved in literacy as well, not just Florida State. And UF has a coaching endorsement program. We do have one of our district members involved with. The great thing about that program is that they'll be able to train our teachers on micro-literacy credentials and even our administrators. So those that maybe don't have a reading certification or endorsement will have that micro-literacy credential, that's struggling readers as well. And that's a huge piece because it doesn't involve such a large amount of time to get the complete certification. I think when I did my reading certification, it was 5 different classes, and it took some time. And so we want to get our teachers equipped a little more quickly to be able to support our students. And so that's another piece we've brought in. Pre-kindergarten, our early learning team is phenomenal. In fact, they're a model for other programs. They come to look at what's happening here in Manatee County. Soarin' 4, again, there's a Soarin' 4 on Wednesday next week. It has, I would say on average, I think 600 to 800 students that come in on a monthly basis, and they receive books, the parents receive tools, and that's the piece there with the early learning, is that parent engagement. How can we work with parents to help them to promote those early literacy skills? We had our Books for Kids launch yesterday, another example of a community organization that has brought together a large group of volunteers to come read to our students in the class. We're looking at programs next year that involve additional coming in during the school day and doing some one-on-one reading with students. It's very hard for teachers to find time for one-on-one reading, but we know it's so important with our early readers. And so if we're able to build that into the classroom time without disrupting the teacher, of course, it's a benefit to the student and the teacher when they see those reading scores come up. Of course, a host of other items listed in here. Our Dive into Reading program, again, that is a program started here with our community partners, but being copied in other places in the state because of that success. And we'll continue that work with Dive into Reading and our other literacy events. Part of the Soarin' 4 program is to do additional outreach in addition to the once a month program. The libraries have partnered with us to do giveaways, and so when you go to, thank you. When you head into one of the Soarin' 4 events at one of our local libraries, the parents and the very young children come in, and you'll have 4-year-olds, you'll have babies rolling on the ground, but it's a reading program, and then the parent is handed not only books and materials, but examples of activities they could do with that book to encourage literacy. Of course, the Patterson Foundation, a huge partner. And like I said, really, our early literacy is continuing to grow, and we truly believe by building in more early literacy programs, you'll see, I mean, our K-2 data, you saw in there, our proficiency is hitting higher than it has in the past, and that has to be credit to what's happening before they even walk into kindergarten. This slide has quite a bit. I know there's a lot of small print on here. I apologize. But we wanted to make sure we captured everything. The ESOL department, of course, has been doing a tremendous amount of work in boosting the supports for our ESOL students. Of course, we know our ESOL students are required to take the same assessments, and we want to make sure that they have acquired the skills they need to perform well on those assessments. We have a parent engagement specialist now for the first time that works with our students with disabilities. Should there be concerns at the school, they will partner between the parent and the school to make sure that student receives support. Very important to us that we're doing all outreach we can to help all of our students. Multiple works here with other community resource fairs. We have another fair coming up March 4th, community fair at MTC on a Saturday, where we will provide curriculum. We'll have tables for resources so parents can learn what we're using in the classroom. ESC will have a table, ESOL will have a table, and then different community organizations will have multiple tables as well. But we believe in outreaching to our community because, again, we can't do it all during the hours of school. We know that we need parent support, community support to accomplish this huge task and boost literacy. I will say, in looking at data specifically this year, in our 8th grade, which was a tremendous concern to us coming in after COVID, and then in 7th grade, we did see an improvement between our PM2 data versus our proficiency level in 21-22. We're at 51% for proficiency for 8th grade in PM2. Our benchmark, which we use to help calibrate, showed 50%. Is it where we want to be? Not at all. We saw level 1s and 2s increasing. Had our 3s stayed, I think we would see that higher, and so we're hoping to be able to capitalize that. And then in our 3rd grade, we were 46% proficiency on the FSA last year. We showed a continue at 46% for PM2. Our benchmark did show a 2% growth. We're pretty comfortable with our benchmark data, but I'm going to say the same thing I said about secondary. If we can bring those level 3s back up, we should see a higher percentage of growth. And of course, that's what we hope to achieve. And then by incorporating those additional measures in phase 2 next year, I think our goal is to match the growth that we see happening in math. Technology, you can see here the work being done with the technology team. Mr. Hansen and his team do a tremendous job. Of course, that affects learning in the classroom, our work with IT. And then in addition to the academic support, we heard last year from many teachers that there were concerns about just student behavior in the classroom and overall classroom management. We had a lot of new teachers. We had students who had not been in the classroom in a couple years. And we had, kindergartens and first graders who had never been in a formal classroom environment. And so our district implemented our Sparks Champs program last year with tremendous training. Every single new teacher was trained. It is now a part of new teacher orientation. You can see on our website all the resources and tools related to Champs and Sparks. But if we don't have a solid management system in our classroom, you can't get to the standards. And so this year, we, with great success, have found that this common communication that students see from classroom to classroom, from cafeteria to the bus, has helped students understand the expectations of behavior and adhere to those expectations. The ESE department continues to work and offer their support to schools. And then our MTSS program works not only to identify academic interventions and behavior interventions as well. Our dual language program, we have 5 schools with the dual language program. There's plans for a 6th location next year. And then to continue expanding at programs, and we do monitor specifically data related to dual enrollment programs. Last year, the FSA ELA data and the math data showed positive trends in those dual enrollment programs. Students are learning and making the gains as expected as we need them to. You'll see additional work with English language development and work to supporting our families that come in and that we need to work with in order to get them to be able to learn at the same pace as all other students. Civics literacy. You'll see on slide 13, we have specific professional development related to civics literacy with additional opportunities coming. We have a state representative working with civics literacy coming to work with our teachers. We've had them multiple times this year work with our teachers to learn the new standards related to civics. Curriculum maps have been revised and will be revised again this summer to make sure that we've captured all civics standards. And then the Florida Civics Seal of Excellence course is available to teachers. Teachers are actively doing it right now, and those courses continue through the summer. That's a state course where they can add that to their certificate. In addition, staying on the social studies, the FCLE, which is your civics literacy exam taken by high schoolers, there was a 5% increase in proficiency from where we were last fall to this fall, and we are above state proficiency on that assessment. And we continue to monitor our civics benchmark proficiency. We were at 77% this year. Civics benchmark is a middle school assessment. Working on Bright Futures as well to make sure our students are meeting Bright Futures requirements. As you know, that guideline changed this year to allow for work hours, but we do monitor students. A lot of students don't turn in their hours until the end of their senior year. And so we'll take a measurement at the end of the year. But it's very important to us that our students have everything they need to be able to be qualify for monies to go to post-secondary education. We did talk about our special programs that we're involved with, so I won't go into that. But that financial literacy does go into effect next year in high school for freshmen. We're waiting for the state to give us information on which courses qualify. Freshmen have to earn that before they graduate, starting with next year's cohort. So as soon as we get information from the state, we'll continue to share. And then, of course, starting in March, we'll announce that we're putting together our committee for social studies textbook adoption. That committee will meet through the summer, early fall to bring social studies materials for your review. And that committee, as our ELA and math, is comprised of teachers, community members, parents, so that we have a wide variety of voices at the table. And then after social studies is completed next fall, we'll immediately start doing work on science adoption, which will be our next adoption to come up after social studies. We just had an entire presentation on visual performing arts. I'm going to speed through slide 14. Slide 15, again, is your Department of Technology and the work being done just really to enhance all avenues of learning for our students and giving our teachers the tools that they need to be successful. On slide 16 speaks to AVID. So advanced via individual determination is what AVID stands for, but I'll tell you what it means. So AVID is a program that works on learning strategies, study strategies, what college is, trips to visit colleges, speakers come in, and any student in an AVID course. So generally, you would bring in students who maybe aren't necessarily taking advanced coursework. You pair them with an AVID and an advanced course, so you give them the tools they need to be successful in that advanced course and to accelerate their learning. They just need a little extra support, and once they feel that success builds success, then the research says that student will go on and continue advanced coursework moving forward. So we have COVID. We don't have COVID. We have AVID.
The difference.
Right, very different. We have AVID at the following schools, and we will continue to support and grow the program. It is, from what we see, it has improved students' grades that take part in the AVID program and gives them what they need to eventually be college career ready. PSAT, for the first time, we offered all 8th grade students the PSAT. We do offer all 10th grade students the PSAT at no charge. Again, it's not about just giving the assessment, it's about what you do with the data. And so with that comes parent resource nights, so they can learn about what their child's scores mean. And then additionally, for school leaders, so how they can use that data to support student learning, and then get them into that, again, that advanced coursework, whether it be through an ACE program, whether it be IB, whether it be AP, whether it be dual enrollment. We just want them to have access to those college level credits while they're still in high school. And then beginning on the bottom of slide 16, next year we will have a K-12 program designed for career exploration and planning, as well as work-based learning, for on-the-job training. We're very excited about this program. This is something the state is bringing in for every district. We have just started our district training, and we're going to be rolling it out to administrators, working very closely with Dr. Gansmer and his team, working closely with our school counselors. But this is going to be that full suite that we've been looking for to really identify what our students need early on and support them through graduation. You saw that Dr. Gansmer released that senior handbook, and so this helps build students to what they need to be successful as a graduate of Manatee County Schools. And then I promise I'm almost done. Acceleration opportunities for our middle and high school students, we're expanding those as well, rolling out IB next year at King Middle School, increasing ACE opportunities for students at Bayshore High School, increasing opportunities at existing campuses by expanding our partnerships with USF. But again, very important, research shows if you have students take college level coursework in high school, they will be more successful in college after high school. And I know as a parent myself, my child graduated with his first year of college completed, and that goes a long way when you're planning college fees for your child. We do, as you see here, look at all levels of proficiency when we go through ELA and math. As again, I'll say it over and over, my whole career has been in literacy, and so this is not where we want to be. I do see positive signs, and we will continue the work, and then we'll add layers to continue supporting literacy. And this actually goes into Mr. Wagner's slide, so I'm going to pause here because I'm sure you have questions, thoughts, and feedback.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A lot of information there. Great stuff.
Yes, lots of
It really is. I mean, I know the strategic plan is really great. I love that we're coming back like 6 months later and seeing how it's actually working.
Yes.
Great. So I know we have some questions. We'll start with Mr. Tatum.
Okay, thanks. These are kind of random because I just took some notes along the way. So you just mentioned the dual enrollment and that if students take college level courses in high school, they seem to do better in college. So, and there's probably some research that supports that. I taught at SCF for a semester. I taught a college level French course down there, and I had high school students coming over. What's the name of the school right next to SCF? One of our.
Are you talking about Bayshore High School?
Yeah, there you go. I think I should know that. I'm wondering.
Just making sure you was what campus.
Yes. So anyway, some of the students that came to my class were just not ready for college level courses, either from a maturity level or from a skills level. And so while I'm in favor of doing these courses, because then there were some other ones that were like, yeah, you're up for it, so to speak. How do we screen students, let's say, to make sure that, because I don't think it was a good experience for them, you know, they were, for lack of a better term, they were out of their league, which doesn't mean that anything bad about them, it's just maybe that wasn't their time in life to be in a college level course. So how do we screen them to make sure that they're ready to go do something like that? Because I think it might have actually been detrimental when they didn't succeed as well as they thought
Sure.
they might.
And so in order to be a dual enrolled student, there are assessments that have to be passed and a grade level or a GPA that has to be met. And so SCF and USF both set their parameters, and it's in our articulation agreements when we meet. But you're generally at a I would say 3.5 GPA, I know is USF. And you can either qualify through the ACT, SAT, or the PERT test. And so we do offer PERT tests for our high school students. And they have to receive scores in both writing and math. And it's not easy to qualify. But as we said, you know, in talking to acceleration for third graders, it's not just about academic ability, it's also about sometimes maturity. And so I think that is the reason why we're seeing more attention to life skills, why we created a senior handbook, why this new program that offers college career exploration are going to be impactful, because you have to make sure that we're teaching some of those soft skills. So students, when they move into a collegiate level course, they know the expectations might be different than when they were in their high school level course. And so it's about teaching the academics, and as the state is referring to as life skills as well.
Okay. Just a thought for.
Can I jump in on that just real quick? Just because my daughter is applying for dual enrollment stuff, and so we just went through this process. And so there was meeting with guidance counselor, like her meeting with her guidance counselor, making sure, and then also the whatever, like, gosh, just slipped my mind. Whatever, not academic, whatever.
Criteria?
No, program. Gosh, if it's English, math. Gosh, it's
PERT?
slipping.
Are you talking about that?
No, just like if you're taking that class course.
Okay.
That course, right? So if she wants to dual enroll in English, her English teacher that she currently has now, there's a conversation between, hey, are you ready for this? And this is what the expectations are. I know at Manatee, we know who that dual enrollment teacher is, and so there was conversation about that as well. So I think that, sure, you got to make the scores, you got to make the testing. That just doesn't mean that you're ready for it, you know, and so I do think there is, at the school level, there are some of those conversations happening so that you don't send someone off to go to somewhere and it'd be detrimental, like, oh man, this is what college is like, I'm not going anymore, you know. So because they weren't ready for it. I don't think I'd have been ready for it at 17, 18, you know, as a junior and senior. So so there are things like that.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers that
That's
question.
good to know. It just wasn't a onesie, twosie. It wasn't like one. It was like there was about 6 of them or so in my class where I thought, not quite ready for this. And I was just curious what the criteria is. Okay, thank you. Going down my list here. You made the statement that English language learners are progressing and making gains as expected. So how do we know that?
So dual enrollment, not dual enrollment, dual language students, we extracted their data at the end of last school year to look at where they were performing on their data versus district data versus state data, just so we can and we do that in many of our programs. We will bring out just the students in that program to say what, kind of what we were talking about with the arts. What is the impact on academics with this? And we saw very strong trends. I don't have it with me on students in the dual language program.
Okay. Is millage money tied to that at all in some way? English language programs? No? Okay. I'm just looking for more data to show that.
Right, and so dual language programs, and then we also pull out data specifically for our ESOL students, not necessarily the same, to look at performance, students that have been in the country for 2 years, students that have been in the country for longer, to make sure that we're adequately supporting our students and our teachers.
Sure. I'd be interested in seeing that data if you had like whatever progress evidence you had that shows that they're making progress. So, because I mean, it's intuitively obvious to some degree that that children who come into them to proficiency at the 3rd grade level, as opposed to children who've been in the country in pre-K programs and speaking English. So it's just intuitively obvious. It's a challenge.
Sure. And we know that we receive students at all ages from out of country, so working to support is important.
Back on slide number 4, there is a chart, and so I'll go back there. And that chart, it's the one on the right there where it says, let's get back there. Maybe my slide number 4, I'm going to go down one. Actually, it's slide number 3, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go back one more. What does score growth mean? And what do those numbers represent, those percentages represent there?
So what you'll see here is they take current score, and there is a projected level that we should be at in May. So if students continue on this path in May, this is where the students will be. And so looking at that score, then what does that growth look like? And luckily we have Evan McCarthy to do this math for us, and the state offers information on this as well. So in considering what our proficiency should be for our students, what is the growth that we're seeing from what that percent proficiency was PM1 versus now, and how many students showed what they qualify as growth from PM1 to PM2.
So growth just is a measurement of some progress that they've made by increasing their score, but it's not they didn't meet a benchmark. It's just I got a 30% on the test, and this time on PM1, and now I got 40%.
It's a comprehensive test, and so it's measuring what the students take at the beginning of 3rd grade, measures what they should be able to master at the end of 3rd grade. And so how is that growth occurring for the students?
Okay. Again, it's one of those things that it's not my area of expertise. I'll just have to trust that this number means something, and that we're moving forward in that area. Okay, great, thank you. I just wanted the board to know, I kind of asked maybe for a workshop topic to have put together a little reading task force, or just to kind of get us focused on this, because this is an area of language arts where we're not doing as well as we have in the past, and I think Ms. Saunders and I talked about that. Go ahead.
Yes, I did want to respond back to that because I don't know why it slipped my mind. We do have a task force for grade level reading made up with community members already. It's led by United Way. Bronwyn Botel is on there. Also a member of that task force is the Early Learning Coalition, the Patterson Foundation, the county government, of course the school district, and the Community Foundation, because they fund many of these programs. So that has been put in place for about a handful of years, because all of those agencies have a vested interest, but they also provide funding in some sort to provide outside agencies, not the school district, but agencies to improve our literacy program. The Patterson Foundation, of course, not only are they supportive of us, but it's a much broader national and state organization. But what we have the partnership with the United Way, they provide about 10 paraprofessionals targeted in some of our Big Ten schools for literacy. Susie Bowie with the Community Foundation also provided grants and funding for literacy. So I'm going to send you that, and then what we could do is expand on that targeted group that's been working on this, because again, that task force isn't led by the district. We have a district representative, but it's led by, you know, community support. They've come and presented to the board before. We haven't done that recently, so that would be something that we, I think, need to bring back. But we've got that core that's been there. We can certainly expand on it.
But the idea of having one within the school system, you would be in favor of that, not in favor of that?
Well, I didn't think to tell you of this one that we already had, so I didn't know the thought of expanding upon that group that's already been kind of working on it. But just a thought. I mean, I don't know how, you know.
It might be interesting to make it a workshop item. And then you mentioned that, like, you had a program for math, and you were talking about it a little earlier. I don't know if people caught it, but you're doing more assessments, like on a monthly basis, and then you're able to target, okay, these number of students are not doing well in this area, let's focus on that. And that, I know you and I had a conversation of maybe doing something like that in the reading area to try.
Absolutely.
and
We do have a workshop scheduled in March to specifically talk about just our reading intervention and so forth. So I think that's a great place to provide that, and then expand on what are some additional solutions that we can add. So we'll put all that in that March workshop for literacy.
And I will say that, you know, when I was campaigning for my seat, that was an issue that came up a lot. What about this 53% reading level, you know? And I know it's kind of like the transportation thing. We're doing the best we can with the resources that we have, but we need to up our game a little bit, so to speak, and try and figure out innovative ways to do better. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay. All right, let's see. I wanted to make a comment on the accelerated programs. I just think those are really good things, and I would never be in favor of getting rid of those programs. I just wanted to make that public statement that sometimes you hear around the country, well, we can't provide these programs because it's not quote unquote fair to other students. But you know, again, I've said this before, is maybe academically the good Lord gave me slightly above average skill, but he gave me way below average skill in vocational stuff, you know, like, so I'm just saying all students have different gifts, and we want to, hey, if you're really good at plumbing, electricity, then accelerate and do well in vocational school, but providing academic opportunities to those who are strong in that area. So, okay, great. So I was the recent law that was passed, that would be, I got it up here, and it was put into about, and we have our school policy too about, you know, on race and based on race and gender and those type of things. But what purpose do the charts in here? I noticed there's a chart, there are 3 charts, they're on pages 4, 13, and 17. Why are we, I mean, what purpose does it have to be separating out progress monitoring by race?
So we are measured through an index that breaks out our subgroups to make sure that we are adequately performing overall. And so that's why it is broken out, because we do receive a measurement based by subgroup data.
You say where is that from?
So we have a federal index that we receive, and it now we don't know yet what it's going to look like, because remember, school grade is going to be developed and discussed, the parameters as we work through legislation. Not we, those in Tallahassee work through legislation. But there is a federal index before in the previous grade model that you had to receive a 41% or higher, and you were scored based on many factors, but some of those being per each subgroup, how your subgroup data performed. So I don't know if that will change, but that was the old scale. And Ms. Saunders, I don't know if you know if that will change or not.
That was really.
I don't know. They've not released anything yet as to what our grade and changes will be. So I think we're just producing the type of setup as we've had in the past. Same thing with gains, proficiency in those areas. But I think that's why we need to come back in the summertime to tweak this based on what the state says will be the grade formula and academic monitoring for next year.
So again, I'm a novice at this, but am I understanding that somehow our school grades are based on how different races of people perform on progress monitoring tests, or
It would be your federal index score. And if your federal index dropped below 41% as measured by, say, your students with disability or your ESOL students in a particular category, then you would have to, in your school improvement plan, address that as to how you were going to better support student learning.
It also affects, if you drop below a certain category in those, it would affect your federal monies coming in, such as ESE dollars. If you don't have show progress and comparison of growth for graduation, reading, etc., then they do, it falls into a corrective measure, federal state dollars for Title I or ESE, etc.
so I understand English language learners and I understand SWD, I just figured that out, students with disabilities.
Correct.
That's different than classifying all these people by race and trying to figure out, are you saying that the federal government requires us to track people, students by race, and then provide scores based on race like are on this chart, and then they will either deny or approve funding based on these racial categories? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out why we have these categories. Because if you read the law, it says discrimination on the basis of race, color, ethnicity, national origin, disability, marital status against a student or an employee in the system of public K-20 education is prohibited, and it goes on and on. That's the gender, the basis of it. I guess what I'm getting at is why do we track these students based on their race, as opposed to just tracking them as an individual human being, or maybe even a school that seems to have a certain need, but why are we tracking them based on their race?
All of the subcategories we have are categories that the state provides and the federal government provides. So we've not determined those categories.
Right.
That's how our data is supplied to us. And the expectation is that we are supposed to show closing achievement gaps per category. Now, in terms of race, funding's not tied for that. But our students with disabilities, we do receive federal funds coming in that category. Of course, we receive federal funds for our ELL students or our ESOL students. So they are expecting that. But these categories that are set up like this are the categories that we receive from the state as well as the federal government. So when we're producing data to the schools and in our charts, we're just duplicating the charts that the state and the federal government are showing us. Because the expectation is, yes, even though you'll see we combine all of our student learning, all students are making progress. So how are you going to know that if you're not separating it out?
Well, how you would know that is you would just take the aggregate, or you would look at individual students. So just so I understand, so are you saying that the federal government and the state government have said you need to track students by their race, and then
they set up these categories, yeah, and they expect us to have progress improvement for each of these subcategories. Right. They're not, you don't get a grade from the state of Florida of your letter grade of achievement, right, by these categories, but the expectation is that you're improving the achievement gap if there are some that have gaps of learning. The federal index does break it up in these categories, and you receive a federal index score based on the subcategories.
So we're required by state and federal law to find the race of the students, put a little check mark by their name.
All of our students, when they're enrolled, yeah, in their registration form, do indicate all that information.
and then to,
And all those guidelines are given to us by the state.
yeah, and then to track them, uh, take their race
We're not
and put it against
tracking
their score, or it just looks,
But they pull data based on that information.
yeah.
If I may, I'll just be honest. I think it's to make sure that districts aren't saying, "Oh, you ELLs don't care. We're going to focus on you," or "You're Asian Pacific Islander, don't care. We're focusing on this group." I think it's to make sure that as a whole, the district is not forgetting some schools, race, etc., that are in wherever they're at because of whatever reason. And I think it's to hold the districts accountable. I mean, I'm not saying that we would do that here. And I think that sometimes you look at these and you're like, why do we even need this? But
I see
think
the
it could
ELL.
happen.
I see the ELL and I see the SDW, because ELL could be Spanish speakers, Japanese speakers, Haitian, Creole speakers, and the SDW, students with disabilities. Those last two are very different than dividing up people by race and being required to track them, and then,
Kevin is there a policy or a statute right
Well,
there?
so you're reading from HB 7, right?
actually it went into law. Now it's chapter 2002
Either if you look at HB 7 that passed last year, or which is now Florida Statute 1000.05, which is called the Florida Education Equity Act. If you read line 263, which is after the part you shall develop and implement methods and strategies to increase the participation of students of a particular race, color, national origin, or disability, blah, 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 including but not limited to mathematics, science, computer, electronics, communication, engineering, career education. The functions of the Office of Equal Education Opportunity of the Florida Department of Education shall include but not limited to conducting studies of the effectiveness of methods and strategies designed to increase the participation and performance of students in programs and courses in which students of a particular race, color, national origin, disability have been traditionally unrepresented, and monitoring the success of those students in those programs.
Right.
So that has always been the law of Florida, that the Department of Education tracks students in underrepresented categories.
what's an underrepresented category?
Those listed right there. Those are defined by state law and by federal law.
So it says to increase participation in them, but it doesn't say.
And monitor the success in those programs. And the Department of Education specifically does that.
Well, what would be an example of a program?
It lists it. So it says on page 11 of the law, including but not limited to mathematics, science, computer, electronics, communications, engineering, and career education. Not limited to. So it could be those plus everything else.
Right. So when I see the word program, so what that was meant to do was to enroll, to encourage what? American Indian students and Alaskan Native students.
Required in that Title IX report is to show the subgroups and that they are increasing or comparative in AP, IB, ACE, all those accelerated type courses. So we are required to submit a report with that. So if you didn't have the data set up in the system by subgroup, there's no way that you could submit that required by statute Title IX report. And it's for equity and so forth. So I do believe it's.
Yeah, I won't spend too much more time on this, other than to say to me it's contradictory in the law, where it says you shouldn't discriminate based on race or gender, and then we basically go down and say, well, we actually are going to discriminate based on race and gender, and we're going to have specific programs to try and help American Indian, Alaska Natives, Asian Pacific Islanders. I mean, what if I'm a student of somebody that's not represented, a parent of a student that's not represented here, and say, well, I notice you have this extra program for American Indian and Alaska Native students so they can do better in math or reading. I'd like to get into that program too. And like, well, no, we've targeted that towards American Indian or Alaskan Natives. How would that square with not discriminating based on race and gender?
Well, I can give you an example of a program we have similar that we target for one of these populations, and that is our dual language program. half of that program of the course are set up for students that are coming in that are Spanish speakers or non-English speakers.
Right.
The other half are comprised of any other student population.
Right.
So they're able to participate. We just make sure that half of that class are specific for the non-English speakers, hoping that they will be immersed through this instruction to improve their English fluency and English language speaking. So I think you're very correct that you have to be careful when you are trying to ensure that if you're setting up a program to improve and support a population, that you're not discriminating against the other. When you are doing that Title IX report and you're trying to increase the college acceleration courses, it's to ensure, and I'll tell you as a high school principal, as a middle school principal, it used to be the process for students getting into those had to be a parent request and a parent application. In some cultures or languages or so forth, their parent may not be able to apply that application. So even though this child has the aptitude and the ability, they're weeded out of the process because of that situation. So it's to ensure that they're not limited, and we're mindful of that, and we're ensuring that whatever our process to get into IB, ACE, AP, not excluding any, and that we're ensuring that we're going out and recruiting and looking at students' ability. And I think because of that, we've improved the access, because really it's about access and an ability to allow students to be in those programs. And by having to have a parent fill out an application, we excluded some students that should not have been excluded.
Well, to me, that makes sense. I mean, if someone is having trouble with the English language and they need help filling out an application.
Their parent, right.
Yeah,
But that is years ago how it was. So we annually have to send a report, so we're showing what we're doing and how we're making sure that we've not put barriers in, so that all these different populations of students, all of them, have equal access and accessibility. And it looks like we're, in comparison to national trends and norms.
So when you read this here, and I've actually read that, Mr. Chapman, I appreciate you bringing that up. It says to increase the participation of students of a particular race. And then it does say including performance follow-up. But it doesn't say that we have to track students by, it says increase their participation in programs, but it doesn't say that we actually have to break out by race and report back. It's a law thing. Maybe.
But that law is not going to that law doesn't talk about the tracking. The tracking comes from the Department of Education.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They are the ones who say, here's how we want you to track. Use this formula, use this, and the federal government. So it's two different things. You're looking at the law, and what the law says, but the law doesn't actually implement. The implementation is done by the Department of Education. I think that if the legislatures, in my opinion, what you're saying, if the legislatures really didn't want that, they should have said that. Do not track, do not, you know what I mean? And so they created the law. The people who are putting the law into place now, the Department of Education, this is the formula they've used to do it. I'm not the expert, but that's what and so I just think that it's two things. Just
and if they didn't want it broken out in the registration form, those pieces would not be in the registration.
I think too, just real quick, just something that was lost, where you asked about a specific, if a race that's not listed right here, or subgroup that's not listed, I don't think we'd necessarily look at, and now this I could be completely wrong. Obviously, ELL is a little bit different, dual language is a little bit different, but we don't look at Hispanic, white, black, and say, okay, we're doing a specific program for you. It's just a numbers. If you don't pass this ELL, et cetera, number, then you need to do this extra. Doesn't matter what race it is. So I don't think we as a district are looking at the subgroup and saying, okay, we're going to use this subgroup for that. This subgroup's going to get this one. This subgroup, this. I think it's when you're in the process of educating and you get the scores back. The scores are the scores, and if you're under 40, you're under 50, whatever number we want to use, you're going to use this. You're going to move to this next program to help reiterate what we've been trying to teach you. And I don't think it's like, oh, well, you're, Johnny, you're white, you're Hispanic, you're black, you're going to use different ones. So I think in the actual producing in the education part. Now I could be wrong. At least as a teacher, I never looked at a subgroup and said, oh, so I think that's what you were asking when you were asking about the programs. So I want to make sure that was answered. That we're not
If a student's test
picking and
score
choosing.
indicates that they need assistance in reading or math and they need a remedial course, they go in that course.
Yeah.
But we look at the student data.
Well, you said, Mr. Choate, we're not looking at it, but I'm looking at it. and so I'm wondering, what does this chart mean to me? If we're not giving special treatment to different races of students based on these categories, then why are we looking at this, and why is this chart?
The state's asked us to and told us to. I mean,
Okay.
That's about the easiest.
And
thing.
so, but why do we have it in this? Like, what purpose does it serve for me to look at this chart and say the American Indian and Alaskan Natives on ELA PM1 were at 29% and they moved up to 36%, and the Hispanics were at 24 and moved to 29.
I would I don't know. You guys can actually answer this. I would assume that because at the end we're going to see that data broken out like that anyways. So we want to see the progressiveness of how that's moving throughout. I mean, I don't know why you guys.
If the board wants all that removed, if the board wants that removed, if the board would like us to set it up different, we'll be more than happy to.
It's a discussion for another time. I'm interested in the overall aggregate of how we're doing. I'm not interested in how American Indians and Alaskan Natives are doing versus the Hispanics. And it's just an odd chart. I don't understand why they're in here, but I think I made my point, and we will move on. So, okay. ESE. Yes, so back in the fall, before I took office, I had a discussion with the director of ESE, a gentleman, I don't remember his name, and he said something like, so we have about, 52,000 students enrolled right now? Is that a good estimate?
Projected next year at 53, but
okay, but right now,
we're about 52.
Does that include charter school students? Or
Yes.
It does, so are they included in our ESE numbers by any chance? Like if a student is...
Yeah, all of the traditional schools are in the state population of data. So when you get an overall district breakout, it will include all the students.
Okay. So he threw out a number, something like 10,000 students have IEP programs. Is that a reason? I remember that number sticking in my mind. Like, maybe you don't track those things,
About
but
13%. Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
And then he said, and we had a long conversation about this, and one of the things that he brought up was the fact that apparently you can only suspend, like if a student has an IEP, you can only suspend them maybe 10 days. Is it a year, a semester? Per year. And that caused some problems with us being able to effectively administer discipline. The other thought I had was we do get more money for ESE students per FT. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So
depending on what level of service they receive, that is correct.
yeah, and the 10-day a year rule is like is it a federal law?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
How do we assure that the program actually is providing students that need those services what they need without expanding it and letting it be? Because I have heard, when I say heard, I mean people have told me in professional environments that maybe this program is used by parents who want, they find that their students get extra time on tests or they get extra advantages if they have an IEP, and so it's like, great, I'll get my student this thing, and therefore they'll get all the advantages of. And then second of all, corollary question, how do we make sure that we're not using it just to get more money per FTE? So an overall question of, are you confident in the stability of the program and that it's not being abused either to get more money or by parents being able to use it to get their students special advantages? That's
Well, I can address the money. I don't know if you remember when we had that budget workshop that Ms. Sellers did. We provide about $10 million beyond what the state gives us for the extra ESE funding. So I can assure you, I don't believe anyone's designating a child for ESE to benefit financially for the district, because it actually is the reverse. We pay far more than any funding we receive for it. So that's number one.
Can I stop you there quick? So what you're saying is when you say we, the district, out of our general funds?
Yes, we have to make up that difference, because by law, if a child has been determined to meet a disability and need to receive X amount of services, you have to provide it, whether the state or the federal government gave you the money or not. So we provide $10 million out of the general fund, I'm giving you round numbers, beyond what we receive for funding for that program.
So you're saying, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I just want to try and understand as we go along here. So what you're saying is there's a level 4 ESE student, right? I'm learning all this. And so we get an FTE for X amount of dollars. And it's determined that that student actually needs a few more services or needs to be moved up to level 5 or something like that. Right. And so then we actually have to, out of our own general funds, have to provide those services.
Absolutely.
And that works out to, on average, about $10 million a year, above and beyond the FTE that we got for the students that we have.
That is correct.
So it's not a situation where there
is no financial benefit to the district. As a matter of fact, we spend around $10 million beyond what's required or what we receive in order to provide the services for the students of disability. Okay. Secondly, we don't determine whether it's not a subjective decision on whether a child qualifies for ESE services. They have to be tested. They have to meet the rubric and the criteria. In many cases, some cases, it's a private physician that has made that determination. But when they meet this criteria, and there are psychologists, many people that have to determine the criteria. Once they do, then those services have to be followed per that IEP. And then we have to follow the federal guideline of what that means if they're a student of disability. Discipline is covered within that. You have to follow the discipline rules, but also what's allowed for testing, graduation, third grade retention, etc.
Okay. Well, I'm just glad to know that there's...
But it's not set by our criteria.
Okay. Well, that's just good to know that there were some guidelines in place, because that seems 10,000, that's like 1 in 5 students in the district actually has an IEP. And I do know that when I was a substitute teacher, there were students that would just get up and walk out of class and go, I have an IEP, I'm leaving and going to... Yeah. Again, this is not my area of expertise, so if you're confident that it's a well-run program and it's not being abused.
Well, I will say it's a very complex department. I will also say that one of the things that is being conducted soon, I am having an outside consultant come and evaluate the whole program to determine the efficiency, but also the financial part, because we are spending far more than we're receiving. So I think it would benefit the whole agency. I've worked with our ESE director on this as well. It would benefit all of us moving forward for an outside firm to say, are there better ways that we can structure and set up our division to provide more efficiencies or even better outcomes. academically and otherwise. So that will be conducted and begin soon, in the next month or so.
Okay, thank you. And it's a good idea. Just always have an outside eye on things.
Absolutely.
Two more questions. I'm going to move forward here quickly. Slide number 6, if we could go to that real quick, please. On the right there under strategy 1, in the last 6 months, metric number 2, bullet number 2, it says we hired 243 new teachers, 182 of them retained, 75% retention rate. Again, I'm not an expert. I haven't been inside the system to know well enough. Is that a good retention rate? Is that an average retention rate? What would you both say based on your experience as educators?
I'm not the HR expert on this as well, but in I would say any industry right now, 75% retention rate seems very positive, but we will continue, as it says, to monitor as we, after this year, monitor as well to make sure that our goal would be to retain all of our teachers, and so certainly improvements to be made.
Is that, in your experience, Ms. Saunders, is that good? Is it average? It's a little below average? Or,
I think we have a couple of issues now since COVID specifically.
Okay.
And because there are fewer and fewer people going into the profession, I will tell you, when I started 34 years ago, who started finished, and you stayed in the profession for 30 years. We are hiring many people now into the teaching profession that did not start as that being their profession. They didn't go to school to become a teacher, so they don't have the pedagogy or all of the instructional practices walking in the door. I'm sure you can vouch yourself. Being a teacher today may be a little challenging, and if you didn't come equipped with that, and you're having to learn that as you're in the classroom, I think some of our people that we're hiring out of field, coming from a second career option, it may be a little bit more challenging. So I do think we've got to come up with different strategies of support than what you had to do 10 years ago, so that you are able to retain them, because the level of support you're giving that group of professionals is completely different than someone that graduated with a degree in instruction and knows what the profession is, an intern and et cetera. So actually I'm pretty pleased with it, but I think COVID and some other variables today makes it a little bit more challenging than it would have been 10 years ago.
okay. And then my last question is, you mentioned someone called a parent engagement specialist. Was that for the IEP students, or who was that exactly?
She can work with all students, in fact, she reports under curriculum and instruction to support any family that is struggling for some reason with accessing their education.
These exist individually at schools? It's one person?
No, she
on
works
staff?
in the district office, and so she's working with principals as they run into situations, and it could be a variety of reasons. She'll work with that parent to help explain options and support the student to make sure that they're attending school and getting what they need.
I've had an idea of, and I'll throw this out real quick, of setting up, and maybe we have these, I don't know, like an office called the Office of Parent Advocacy, where that office would be primarily involved with, those people would be like patient advocates at hospitals, and they would directly interface with parents, because I know recently I dealt with a parent who was having trouble getting information from the public records request, and then she said she didn't get it, and the public records people said they got it, and so I'm actually playing this in between the two of them, trying to work this out along with Ms. Means. But I just thought, that's the type of thing that if a parent wasn't getting services from the system that they thought they could be getting, that this parent advocacy group could work those issues at that level. And then if for some reason the parent thought, look, this parent advocacy group is not giving me what I need, then they could come to us. But I just feel like a lot of times I'm playing parent advocate and actually working some of these issues between different areas of the bureaucracy trying to get people what they need. But I don't know, is that a good idea or not a good idea? What do you, I mean, again, I'm,
Defer to
yeah,
our superintendent.
something to think about.
That's a board decision.
So if,
Create one.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, if I were king of the school system and I came to you as my deputy king or queen of the school system and I said, would that be what would be the pros and cons of having an office like that?
Having a parent advocacy group.
Yeah, where I think we know you and I worked on that issue together, where that parent, instead of trying to work with you and me and us having to work those issues, that parent advocacy group would be empowered to work with different parts of the bureaucracy to try and get the parent what he or she needed for their child, rather
The
than.
issue with that is it comes back to the district, because a parent advocacy group doesn't have access to the information or so forth. So they would just be deferring it back to us for us to respond to it. I will tell you that person had been responded to a number of times.
Right.
Me personally, public record, they got the email 5 times.
Right.
But I think it is our job to respond to people and to make sure if they ask a question or have a need for information, we respond. If you have a parent advocacy group, then they will be speaking to us to give them the information.
Many, we've worked on that over the years. So it started many years ago with a Spanish hotline, for example. So a very well-known number in the Hispanic communities in Manatee County is a 941 number that goes right to our ESOL department. Is answered in Spanish and literally
But it's answered by district staff.
by district staff who will literally answer any question they have and then work on that answer for them, and that's worked very well. That's how we then got to these community resource fairs, where literally it's almost every department in the district where parents can come and get questions answered. And we also have a lot of parent resource nights at schools. And I know our Title I team just put out a survey that they have to do for the title funds. And they look over that data to see how we can improve our outreach to parents. So it's a constant conversation we have in the district, is how we can make sure that parents know who to call or where to go to get information. And this particular new position is kind of an advocate and is working to, and that's why she reports to the executive director to kind of get through the answer. We're always looking for ideas to keep that going, to keep parents knowing where to go. And of course, now with the parental rights bill and all that legislation, we have a link on our website with all of that, with all the rights the parents have, that they can click on all kinds of stuff to figure out how and where and what their rights and roles are as a parent as well. So, and we try to do that on our website. We try to have almost every, if there's not a photo of us, there's at least our name, phone number, and email address directly to us, with almost every person in the district that can get an answer to them. But we'll continue to look for ways to better serve or keep improving our ways of helping parents as they come into our system and look at, even just navigating focus and trying to figure out, look up their child's grades and classes and all that. We do parent universities on focus and things like that. So, but we're always looking for ways to improve it.
And just so it's clear, and by the way, I have to talk about it now because I can't call these people individually and go, hey, what do you think of this idea? So my idea is that they would be employees of the school system. I didn't want you to think that I thought it would be like a group of parents out there volunteering, and that, because the model that I'm thinking of in my head is, I know at military hospitals and probably at civilian hospitals too, is they have a patient advocacy office, and what those people do is, when you don't feel like the system is providing you the services that you need. You contact the patient advocacy office, and then they start working the bureaucracy, and that bureaucracy tends to report right to the commander of the hospital. I just feel still end up having to work them because that, like, the response that comes from the bureaucracy here goes back to the parent. The parent says, I'm not satisfied with it. And then I have to go back and say, okay, Mrs. Smith isn't I have to rewrite Ms. Saunders and Ms. Means and say the parent isn't satisfied with what she got. And it's just this back and forth. And if there was an advocacy office that would be working that, I mean, eventually maybe they would get to me, but it could cut down on that interaction that I have to perform. It's an idea. I can talk to you about it in another meeting. And I just want to bring it up to the board while we're sitting here, since I can't talk to them outside of this. It's hard to vote from jail. So, okay. And I think that was the last thing that I had. I know it took a lot of time, but this is our opportunity to get smarter and learn. And so thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Tatum.
Yep, you're welcome.
I just have just a couple quick things, almost some piggybacking off of his. Just a question about the 1 year retention. I would like to know the data, because it's hard for us to say what can we do to better help a first year teacher become a second year teacher. I would like to know, like, what, and this is probably an executive deal, not here in the strategic plan. I don't want that. Okay, out of those, the 25% that are no longer here, was it performance based? They're just not a teacher. Was it they found another job that's going to pay more? Was it whatever, the school enrollment, so they don't have it, we don't need that person. They didn't pass their test to stay certified, because that number could just be like, oh, we're losing 25% of our teachers. But is that something that we're doing? Is there something so we could go deeper into that? And that's not strategic plan. That's probably an executive meeting between us and knowing where we can improve and where we can't improve. So that number just, to me, I mean, there's a lot more into that data than really what shows. And then the last thing I just want to make sure, because I don't want to forget, and I'd like help remembering, I believe that it is imperative that when we talk about education, parental involvement is the key. And with our SOAR programs, with the career, the resource, I think you said like March 4th, we have one coming up. I saw it on Facebook. Not a career resource, but community resource. There is a nonprofit in the area, and I forget his name. He just spoke at Kiwanis several weeks ago, and they help. And I just want to make sure somebody else hears me on this to remind me to mention this and to get a hold of them. But they help adults that have come into this country to learn English. Mm-hmm. And I forget what the name of the thing, what it's called. But regardless, I think and it's free. I mean, it's very, very cheap. Mm-hmm. So I feel like if we can have something like that partner, we may already be doing things like that already in some of our schools. But if we could have some partner to where, now I'm learning to read right alongside my child, and we're reading Dr. Seuss together, what does that do for that child? To I think that's huge. So I just want it out there that I would like to connect, but I just don't want to forget that person. So you guys can help me with that. And then the last thing I would like to say about the numbers and these sort of things, just a general comment. When did we first really start tracking reading numbers and numbers?
In Florida, it goes back to Jeb Bush, No Child Left Behind.
So it's about like 2000,
20 years ago.
2010. Okay.
20 years ago.
So before that, we have no data.
Correct.
From 2020, let's just say 2000. We have no data to how education was from 2000 previous. So a lot of times we look at these numbers and we're like, oh my gosh, we're only 48, 51%, 48%. Well, what were we 30, 40 years ago? We can't go back and look at a child in 1985 and was he reading at 85% and our population was at 85% and now we're down to 48? Not saying that we should be striving for 100. Of course, we want every single kid. But I think sometimes we dive down in this data and you're like, oh, this is not how it used to read now. How do we know? How do I know what I was in third grade? I don't, because there wasn't data then. We weren't pulling it. We weren't doing what we're doing now. And so I just want to make that a thought, because I think sometimes we jump into this. Who knows what was like 40 years ago, because we weren't tracking it. We weren't keeping data. The other part of this too is, I think that we've got to make sure that we take some of this. These are tests, and we've already done 2 tests, 3 tests, 4. Then they take the final, and we're doing that all on top of everything else they're doing. And I just feel like I don't think that the normal, and I say this because I was a teacher, I don't think the normal public understands what the kids go through. And if your kids are 40 years old, or 2000, so that means if they graduated high school before 2000, you don't know, because you don't have kids in what's going on now. This is not kids can't read. This is not our 53% of our kids can't read. No, these are 53% of the kids can't read and comprehend a test that somebody else has put together. That, by the way, it's the first test we've been doing, right? Because it's best, right? And so this is far beyond just, can you hand a third grader a book on his level and can they read? That's not what this is. Because you'd be highly surprised, in my opinion, that you walk in a third grade class and most of those kids are reading on their level. Now, are they meaning they can read a book that's in third grade book? Now, can they now go back and get on this computer and test on a given day that maybe their parents got in a fight that morning or that night and they didn't sleep, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then we classify them as these kids can't read. And I want to make sure that's just, we can look at this data, but this is not, we're sitting here watching a kid read a third grade book and he can't read this book or she can't read this book.
Right.
I think it's just a little bit, I understand we may have to do some data to do these things, but it's kind of sad that where we're at, this data is not, to me, indicative of what we're actually doing for kids in their education. Soapbox off. Ms. Foreman.
Okay, well, I'll join the soapbox. The testing done in Florida is not the same testing how I did and how my kids did prior to Jeb Bush, because they were taking the Iowa Basic Standards test, the national norm test. And we don't have that in Florida. We don't, unless a kid takes the SAT, and the PSAT, that can be compared to the nationwide. But our Florida, the reading at third grade level, we don't have tests that compare to the U.S. Am I right on that? Yeah. Okay. But anyway, so that's my soapbox. Florida, I think, has gone off in a different direction, and I'm not sure it serves our students well. The other is, and my soapbox on this is on the AP tests or AP classes and the PSAT and the SAT, the College Board. I know it was life-changing for my daughter. Okay, she went to college out of the state of Florida. The college that she went to, which was a private school, and one of the better ones, they would not accept dual enrollment, okay, because it's Florida. They do, and I don't know, back then they didn't have ACE and IB. I don't know how that would have played, but if she hadn't had the AP credits and the SAT test scores that she did, I don't know, she'd be working at McDonald's, I guess. I don't know. but so.
They're giving signing bonuses and stuff. They're giving signing bonuses. And
are they? Well, the law school gave her free ride. So that's, and so those were opportunities that opened up and down, that we keep the AP courses. Speaking of AP, how many students do we have taking those classes?
I could get that number for you. I don't know it off the top of my head. We did increase the number of courses and the enrollment. I know that going into this year than we had in the previous year, but I didn't bring the specific numbers and haven't looked at them in a while.
Do we screen students out just like we were talking about with dual enrollment, or is AP open for anybody who wants to?
So you
take a
do
stab
you
at
do
it?
need to meet certain requirements so you can be successful in the course. And students work with their previous teacher. So if you're sitting in a 10th grade English class, your teacher will help advise the student. We do take in parent input on the registration forms. We take in counselor input to make sure they're appropriately placed.
Okay, all right. One of the
But
new,
Ms. Foreman, you do not have to pass a certain
Yes.
SAT, ACT, or PERT test to get into an AP, where you do for dual enrollment. So it does give students that may not test well, but are very strong academic learners, the ability to have a college level experience on the campus.
and even if they don't pass the AP exam, it's such
A higher rigor.
intense coursework.
Agreed.
You know, that at a much higher level, and I think, you know, if they're up for it and are interested, you know, it certainly serves them well. I wanted to ask about the progress monitoring. Going from progress monitoring number 1 to number 2, my understanding is with number 1 is there's material on there not from what they learned the year before, it is material that they are going to be learning.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you would expect that there would be improvement from 1 to 2,
Yes.
okay? If there's not, something's wrong, really wrong. So is it meaningful, the increase from progress monitoring 1 to 2? I could see where 2 to 3.
Right. And so we look at the scores in two ways. We look at just your raw score, what the student scored PM1, what the student scored PM2. And yes, you would expect to see an increase in that score. But what the state does is they provide, and I'm not speaking the language correctly, but a projected score. So based off the student PM1 score, and I don't know how they do this. That's why they have degrees in measurement and assessment. But this is what we project they will earn PM3 at the end of the year. Then they take the PM2 and they offer that projected score. And so you're measuring that projection. Because it's new to us and we're grappling with it and trying to fully understand the trajectory, that's why we also had our district benchmark data. So we could look at it this year to make sure that we're seeing the growth. And we are seeing that correlation. Our benchmark data is set up differently. It's set up as what did the students earn, for example, what did they learn Q1? Let's measure their mastery of those standards. What did they learn Q2? Let's measure the mastery of those standards. And then Evan McCarthy is able to make the projections on their learning path. And so we did see similarities in that projection for end of the year data. Of course, it's not over till it's over. You know, we still have March, April, May that we're still working with students. That's how it's reviewed.
Okay. Should we be disclosing that data of the projection versus what the performance was?
Yeah, so you'll see, like in the scale score, you'll see that was the growth based off projection. And so we look at it in several ways. And then once the state has fully set cut scores and we're able to see the full picture, then yes, there'll be more methods
Okay.
to show it. We're still waiting for information to come from the state.
You may only have anecdotal information on this, but our kindergartners having to take a computerized test for the first month of kindergarten. How did they do? How do you think it?
I think you certainly, and I went into some of the classrooms to just kind of review the process and how the students were doing. And a credit to our teachers and our school leaders that really supported students as they entered school and went on these devices. We learned some things from PM1, and we brought in additional devices with more touchscreen for PM2. And so the students, I think, on PM2, just with their general comfort with the devices, you're going to see now I don't have evidence to prove this, it's hard to measure, but you'll see a natural comfort level. And the students are going to be more comfortable in just their responding and flow of thought process and everything else. But yes, it is very, it's a new way of work to bring in a student on their first day of kindergarten and give them an assessment. But I will say they rose to the challenge. We took those results and reviewed them. But were we making huge strategic moves or moving? No. It's data. We'll take it. We'll use it. We'll make the best of it. But we're not moving students around as a result of that data.
Okay. This is our first year with the dyslexia screening. Do we have any results on that?
Yes. So we have some results. The first round, I would say they were inconclusive, and so we brought in some training in January and are doing additional work with that data and breaking down what it means. And so yes, we have some indications, but I wouldn't say it's complete yet, as we're still understanding the screener through FCCRR and FSU to really look at what these data points mean.
Right. Okay. One of the new proposed laws is for teacher retention is that if a teacher cannot pass the general knowledge exam, they could still keep their certificate if they're highly effective or whatever. Do we have many teachers that are in that situation, do you know, where they would benefit from that?
I don't have the HR data, but I can tell you as a former principal, that was not a challenge that I ran into with my new staff members on a regular basis. I didn't run into that.
That's interesting. Okay, this one is, I don't know if it just was there and I never saw it before, but there's a thing on the DOE's website where you can compare schools. And one of the things that they have in there are categories: inexperienced teachers and classes taught by out-of-field teachers, which I find very interesting. I pulled up one of our elementary schools, which is a Title I school, and compared it to one of the charter schools. And they are showing that in our school, 57.5% of the teachers are inexperienced. Do you have any, and it's 79.7% at the middle school. Do you have any idea what that means?
I don't know what that threshold would be.
Kind of goes back to what we were talking, that they new into the profession or so forth, or have just graduated and you're starting without. I think that is a new metrics, because I do think the state realizes we have a growth in our state and a need of teachers, but we have a shortage of people being formally trained in the profession. So I do think they're trying to track the performance of how that is going to have an impact on our instruction.
Wow, okay.
But I think that's good that they're looking at those pieces now.
I wish they would show it for the private schools.
We have no data on private schools.
I know. That's my other soapbox, but I'll stay off of it for today. And then, are we seeing an increase in the classes taught by out-of-field teachers? Yes?
Yes. You'll see it every month.
Okay. All right. Okay, and that's all I had. So, thank you for, oh, no, it's not. The data that, for example, the PM1 to 2, do we have it on our website by grade?
I don't believe we've posted it on the website by grade, but let me.
I think that would be really helpful. You know, I'd like to see us put as much data out there as we can on our website. So.
Okay, let me make a note of that. Thank you.
Ms. Spray?
Okay, lots of notes over here. First of all, going back to your comment about Jeb Bush and the No Child Left Behind, I think that whole initiative was to take the kids that struggled and help them along, okay? But I think it's migrated down to lower the standard too, in some cases. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think that that is one of the things that people think we have done, is lower our standard to meet that Jeb Bush, No Child Left Behind. And in some cases, I think we have. That's just my little comment there. Or not just us, I think the whole state has done. Talking about teachers and leaving and a percentage of retention of new teachers. I think we need to create going to Mr. Tatum's issue about parents and public being able to have communication forums. I think teacher mentoring. I think there should be a senior teacher mentoring a new teacher. Do we have a program like that? Because to me, you know, if there's some, you know, one-year teachers leaving, 25% of them left. Why did they leave? Was it, again, job or whatever?
Right. And so I know, I know from HR in working with Mr. Bailey and his team, they have worked on an exit interview process and going to interview new teachers and checking on the mentor relationship. They put in extra steps this year, knowing that we have a teacher shortage concern. Mm-hmm. And I don't have all of their information, the result of their work, but they are doing that. We also brought back the teacher mentor program. And so we do have experienced teachers working with our new teachers now. Again, we used to have it, you know, things during COVID, and it returned this year.
For instance, a retired teacher from another state wants to volunteer and mentor a new student or something to that effect. I don't know if we have any kind of program like that established at all.
Not to my knowledge with retired teachers, but I'll make a note of it. And HR
That might be something to look at. I think it would get, you know, the senior teachers, help the new teachers along and let them see that there is a way to progress this. Got to get beyond the shock and awe of being in a classroom, because going to school to be a teacher and going to the classroom and teaching, we all know is way different. You know, it's like reading a book and then going to the play.
Right.
So I think that we should look at that kind of a program. Into the, we have in every classroom students that excel, and we have some that lack, for lack of a better word, that are struggling. Do we have any kind of a program that we can do that within, like, third grades? You got one that's really good, you got one that struggles. Let the one that's doing really well partner with the child that struggles and put them together in the classroom. And to me, that would build a relationship with the child who struggles and the one who excels all the way through graduation, in my opinion. I mean, you could do that in 4th grade, 5th grade, and that relationship would build throughout their whole education, K through 12 or pre-K through 12 even. So I think that would be, someone had brought that to my attention a couple of times. I had an in-depth conversation. I was more like mentoring outside of the district into schools like different trades, skilled trades or whatever. But they brought it to my attention, no, we need to have a peer-to-peer with these kids. And I think that we could do that, and it would build relationships. You know, you got the kids that are, you know, better at sports,
Right.
and kids that are terrible at sports. maybe that child that's good at sports could bring along one,
Sure.
not necessarily to play sports, but to show them, you could eventually play this if you wanted to. But to me, and then too, all of the programs that we've talked about, my goodness, go through this whole deck, and you can highlight all the different programs and outside sources, and to still have reading scores still in the 50%, to me is like, wow, we're throwing so much effort into bringing kids up to a reading level, but we're not really, getting to that. We're starting to really move the bench a little more. So that's where I think that peer-to-peer, student peer-to-peer program, if somebody could develop something like that, I think I hope the board would support something like that to where kids could buddy up. Let's be your friends. And it even goes to demographic of a child that comes from a better way of life to a child that doesn't have a good way of life. That connection could be maintained throughout their whole childhood. I know that worked for me when I was in school. Also, going back to teams, I think there should be a local team comprised of different community leaders. We got so many teams going on here, but a curriculum action team, I've mentioned that several times. Our community understand it and be involved, even in the strategic plan. I mean, it all comes into one big pot. This is what we're doing. And it takes this partner, that partner, and the district to do all of these things. But we have to have some kind of way for the community to understand it's not as easy as you think. It is really hard. And I've read so much stuff, and it's just a lot. And I think having more people involved in the community is going to be beneficial to let them understand it's really not as easy as you think either. Just like, running for a school board race and being a school board member are two very different things. Same thing with being involved with a program. And I'm with you, Mr. Tatum. I think there should be some sort of parental involvement, what was it?
Parent advocacy.
Yeah, parent advocacy, because if you look at we all looked at the demographics of Asian American, Black, Hispanic, multiracial, all of that, but we're not looking at parental involvement. How many of these students that are lacking in their education levels are parental involvement? Where's the parental involvement? I understand everybody works and there's things like that, but is there something that we can do? Maybe there's, and my aunt died of cancer. And she went to the hospital before she passed away, but she had a pretty bad one. But before that, she went to hospitals and just rocked the babies because it gave her comfort. There are people out there that would help parents along with their kids that I think they have something to offer. And I think that idea that you have could cultivate that. And, because there's parents that cannot do it, but there might be somebody in the community who will step in and say, hey, I'll come help you. I'll do what you can. I know there's programs, I think it's called Better Together or Bridge of Life, one of those that actually help parents when they need to go to a grocery store. They don't have a babysitter, so they bring them along. So I think that would be something that we need to look at. And I don't want to belabor on this. Yeah, parental involvement. See, I'm going around on my notes. And the progressions reports. I think that the progression reports, the data that I see there, it's good. I just, again, I want to see overall progression report, not broken down just by that, but Yeah. And going back to the IEPs, you know, over the past 5 years, what would you say, or I don't know if anybody could give me that data, how many IEP students did we have 5 years ago to how many we have today? I think that would be something that we can look at, because as Mr. Tatum said, some students just walked out of class. They used their IEP as the excuse to say, hey, I have this problem, I can leave. Not so much are we, you know, using it to get funding, but our students using it to get out of their education, to use that and say, oh, I've at my limit of learning. Are they doing that? So it's kind of a two-sided thing there. And then we have to make sure that everything that we are giving the people out there, that they trust the data we're giving them, and they trust that what we're saying is factual. And because optics is everything. And if we don't have a good relationship between the district and the community, and we've got a good relationship with partners, obviously, but out in the public, our optics don't look so well in some eyes, but they look great in others. So let's just kind of, I'd like to see that we do a better job at that. But I think this is a lot of information. I went through this before. I have the whole thing printed at home and was reviewing it prior to this meeting. So that's basically all I have. But I do think that forming those two little committees for a CAT team, for curriculum action team to review curriculum coming up, because that's coming up in the next few months, and especially the peer-to-peer program.
Thank you. And as a reminder, the social studies adoption will have community.
Right.
Community, we have to have parents, you know, that.
Right, that's one social studies, but
Yes.
I'm talking overall. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Miss Messenger, you're up.
I have a lot more comments now than I did. See, you don't want me to go last. I had questions about some of the things that are on here. Number one was MTSS for behavior. I remember that was presented to us, and I was trying to wrap my head around the idea. And so I was just kind of curious how that was going.
Right, so we actually just set up a meeting to convene those responsible for behavior specialists with our group to review the process. The CHAMPS and Sparks is going well.
That's like a tier one.
That's the tier one, right? So first step is to make sure we have a solid tier one, and that has improved. So there's less need for tier 2, tier 3 interventions, and now we're looking at the data from tier 2 and tier 3. So we can, you know, I'll have to look at it with the team, but we do have a meeting set up to do just that, because we want to review our platform, our interventions, track the data, and make sure that it is performing as we expect it to.
Okay, that was what I was kind of curious about, because I remember the presentation. I was like, gosh, I just was curious. I see it on there. How is that working? What would, I don't want to take this more off the rails than I want to focus on what's really in front of us, but I really am very curious. What are tier 2 and tier 3 supports considered for behavior in the MTSS process?
So it could be if they're removed from the classroom, and I'm certainly not the expert on the behavior, but a strategy could be a parent-teacher conference. It could be a peer-to-peer conference. It could be that they require more support, and maybe it's something with our school counselor, and then there would be the parent brought in, this is what we would like to work on your child with. Maybe it's a social skill group, and they work on those strategies for tier 2. It just depends on the situation, but it would be identified based on the needs of the student.
Okay. And kind of just to piggyback on something else some other people have said about proficiency, and the proficiency score changes from the first one to the second one. I guess I kind of wonder how much of that proficiency change is due to actual learning, and how much of it is now knowing how to take the computerized test, because it's not just going to go to my pre-K-er how to take a computerized test.
Okay, swell.
So, So it's just, how much was that really, like, she scores, whatever scores she got.
Right.
But how much is that really, she understood what was happening on the screen, and how much of that was like, I know how to click over here or not?
Right, and
I
some
don't
of
know.
that is certainly going to factor in. It's hard to measure.
Right.
But even in older students, you take the
Right.
ACT, you take the ACT a second time, and you generally, without doing anything, improve the second time, just becoming more familiar with the test. So
Right.
I guess the benefit is they get to take PM1 and PM2. So PM3, they're very familiar with the platform, and any discomfort with the platform shouldn't be part of their test score then by the end. I guess that's the benefit.
I suppose. I guess my hope would be, I'm sorry. I just feel like we're so over tested to the hilt that I feel like it's just less and less learning. You made a comment about how the standards have been lowered. I think it's the exact opposite. I think it's now been raised to a point where it's so not developmentally appropriate. In kindergarten, when I was going to kindergarten, it was half day and I got a nap.
Yeah.
And now they walk out the door knowing how to read. Because I taught kindergarten. That's what they had to do in a Title I school. They walked out the door knowing how to read.
Yes.
So if anything, it's the opposite. The standards are so high that when you're looking at that percentage, you're like, well, is that really telling you, does that have any validity? Because it's either telling you, can they take a test on a computer? Can they answer the question appropriately because they probably can read the text? Or is it completely developmentally inappropriate and they're just not there yet because that's not what their brains are meant for yet? So the test is not made by someone that understands child development. The test is made by a testing company that wants to make money selling the test.
Exactly.
So I don't know how much credence I put. I put credence in it because we have to put credence in it because that's what we're graded by, and I get that. That's the system, and whatever. I abhor it. Cool. I abhor it, but it exists. I understand that. I would love the idea of next year not having the benchmark if we find that this state thing is valid and that the teachers can use it to guide their instruction.
Right.
I've gotten printouts like for my child to see I wanted to see what does it look like, what does the teacher get, and I see they get like a standards breakdown, but if it's not to the level or depth that the teacher needs, then it's not an appropriate tool that we should be even using at the state level because we need less tests, not more.
Right.
So that's my opinion on that. That's my soapbox. I think we're all on the same soapbox.
You mean the district benchmarks?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason. I understand why you're doing it. I get it. I just would like it if we didn't.
Right, and we see that as well, and
Yeah.
and are looking at taking away for anything that has the FAST assessments. Now we will have civics, U.S. history, biology. They're not part of FAST, and so we'll still have some benchmark data.
I get that. I get that.
But
I just the least amount possible in order, but not to the point where you can't guide instruction.
Agreed.
But there was comments made about taking tests regularly like we do in the math, but that does happen in reading. There are unit weekly tests, at least in elementary schools, on every week. They're taking a test. Oh, how did the child do in this certain thing I was teaching them this week? Oh, how the child that happens every week.
So it's taking that and bringing in a common assessment approach so we can look at it district wide, and so that's what we mean. We don't mean by adding to that. That's not what we mean.
No, I understand, but
Right.
my point was the district is doing that so the district has the information, but the goal should be that the teacher has the information. And if the curriculum supplies an appropriate test for the week,
why do extra?
Right, and so the test would be based off the curriculum resources. That's what we're looking at, is capitalizing on the resources to make that progress monitoring so we can see where the students are and teaching our teachers how to use it.
another one of my questions was about the accelerated ELA program. How is that one done?
And so, similar to what we call the math club, where the students will go out and do the math club. There's an ELA, at my son's school, they call it WIN, and the students will rotate perhaps teachers and go to the accelerated block, and then they have materials associated for accelerated learning in elementary. They're using DPQ where it's document-based questions where they'll take multiple sources and do their activity based on the ELA standards.
Is it district determined on how they will do that accelerated? I mean, what I'm asking is, I have heard from schools that splitting wastes a lot of time, educational time, because it might work for a smaller school, but some of the schools that are in my district are giant.
Right?
And splitting 200 third graders to all different rooms takes a considerable amount of time that the child is then not learning. So I guess my question is it up to the school to determine how that is done? Or is it district-wide, everyone's going to split?
So we give guidance and say that, and working with feedback from principals, this is how we believe it should be done, so you can accelerate the learning for students who are, and then provide the support for the students who are reading below grade level during that same time. Now, some schools have done it differently. Part of our process with scheduling for elementary, because this is the first year we've done it, is to come back together and review how did this work for your school. If a school is having a loss of instructional time during transition, yes, we have to fix that.
Okay, that's my big concern.
Yes.
Like, I am all for acceleration. I think, once again, it gets to a point where it's not developmentally appropriate anymore. But I'm all for acceleration if the child can handle it and we're not putting undue whatever on them.
Right.
I'm all for that. But I don't want to do it to a level that it's either inappropriate or it's taking away instructional time,
Sure.
or it's no longer educational benefit. Because to Mrs. Spray's point, she was talking about how having a lower with a higher, there's benefit to both of those students.
Absolutely.
When you separate the groups out into homogeneous groups instead of heterogeneous groups, then you don't have that model anymore of, oh, look, Bobby understood how to answer number 5 and I didn't. Let me listen to Bobby on how to answer number. You lose that because now all of the Bobbies are in one class.
Right.
And all of the Ginas are in a different class that don't.
And remember, with the ELA model, you have both, right? You have your core ELA block, and then you have your 30-minute block as well, either attached to that block or later in the day. But you have both settings.
I guess I'm kind of, I don't know the right word to describe my feeling at this moment. I wholeheartedly supported the millage, and one of the things that was really important to me was that extra 30-minute block, and I really don't want to see it diminished by time wasted splitting. When I really do believe a good teacher can very easily differentiate their lesson, and that's what we're trained to do. They can easily differentiate their lesson to help all of the students in the class, rather than, so that's my 2 cents on that one. And maybe I'm deviating. I'm trying to stay focused, but there's things. I wanted to ask a question about the allocations for ESC. There was comments on here about allocations for ESC, and one of my questions was about class sizes. The class sizes for ESC, has that changed? The allocation?
And not to my knowledge. Okay.
They're smaller than a traditional, but it varies based on what the type of class is. Some of our ASD classes, our self-contained classes are smaller. But as we allocate at the beginning of the year, sometimes throughout the year, the student populations grow.
Yes.
I will tell you our largest shortage of teacher certified area is ESE. So in some cases, the classes may be a little larger than what we would like, what we would anticipate. They're not at the normal class size, but those are factors that play a part of it. For the most part, we try to keep them below 10. Some cases, depending on the severity, below 7, because there are some high needs situations.
Right, that's
But-
actually my concern.
So the numbers start out with low class size allocations, I cannot say that they remain that way as a school year.
See thing that is being done, because I fully support that, but when the numbers go up, there needs to be some sort of plan of how do we help
They do
support
get
that.
another allocation. If the numbers drive it, they can get it, but just because you're given another allocation doesn't mean there's another teacher that applies for the job and is hired for the job. Or if a teacher leaves the job in a school year, that it's very challenging. I will tell you that one of the ways we've increased our certified areas in that is with TPG. We contract with an outside vendor that hires teachers from foreign countries on a 3-year work visa. We've added 25 additional spots this next year. We currently have 25, but our biggest concentration we try to hire are certified ESE teachers, because I know when the school year starts, that's going to be the area that we're going to have the biggest deficit in.
Right, and I guess I worry that we're perpetuating that, because if I'm a self-contained unit teacher and I now went from 17 to 13, but that's not enough to make a whole nother unit, or there is enough to make a whole nother unit, but you can't hire the person, well, then that leads to even more burnout.
You're correct.
So, I guess
And that is an area of concern and an area of challenge that we face. Absolutely.
I guess I was really curious about the dual language students data versus the ELLs and the rest of the district that are not in dual language. Do you have that kind of data?
We can pull that.
I'd be really I'm just interested to see what that looks like. I would really like to see that. It would be very interesting. And to Mr. Tatum's point, that it is more difficult to teach ELLs, but all teachers are required to have an ESOL endorsement, which is to help them understand how to teach those students that come in speaking a different language as their native language. And that is a requirement that they are, even if they are, coming in and they have to then get that endorsement as part of it. About the data and how it's broken out, I just want to point out to the board that the state reports all of that data out and uses that data to compare us to the state and us to other counties. So if you go to the Florida Department of Education's website and go to look up Closing the Gap, they report out how our white students do to our African American students. And they compare us to them. They report all of that. So I think whether you want to look at it or not, because people are people, and I 100% agree with you on that, whether you want to look at that or not, I think it would be a mistake on our part not to acknowledge that that is how we are graded by, and that is how we are tested by. On the federal level and on the state level, we are compared in that manner because they want to see those gaps closed. So, not to mention, I know a lot of community members that very much care about how those gaps, what those gaps are, and how we're closing those gaps. But that's reported to the state. The state reports it out in all of those different categories for everyone to see. So I think we need to do that. I know this one, now this is now off this, but it was mentioned, so I just want to say, involvement in the community. Yesterday we had this wonderful luncheon for Books for Kids, and it was a room packed full of volunteers that they want to come in our schools, they want to read to our students, they want to engage with our students, and there's lots of organizations like that. Mm-hmm. And you're right, there's also lots of nonprofits that help parents, and I think the school district has to walk this line. Our main job is to educate students so they are successful for the future. That's the job. Do we want parents to be involved? Oh, yes, because I think that plays a part. But do we welcome them? Do we want them? Yes. But the focus is the kids and getting them educated. So I just want to maintain that should still be our focus. Like, we can say community involvement, parental involvement, community involvement, parental involvement. Those are important things. I agree. They are imperative. Our focus is students and their academic success so they can be successful and beneficial to our society in the future. So that's my second soapbox. Now I'm off my soapboxes and I'm done.
Thank you.
Can I address something there?
Yeah, you have something else? Yeah.
Just to piggyback on what Ms. Messenger said about the charts that I brought up earlier with race and gender. If we need to include that for some reason because there's a legal requirement or whatever, okay, fine. But I would have much rather have seen for this school system those scores by schools, like which are struggling or which part of our community is struggling. It was just odd to me, like, why did we pick those charts to be, because there's nothing I can do with that. There's nothing I can, let me finish real quick if you don't mind. There's nothing I can do with that information, but I could if there were schools that were struggling or if there was a section of the community that was struggling, I could do something with that, but there's nothing I can do with that. So if somehow that's on a state side and people want to see that, I do believe off of doing things to help students without reference to their race and gender. I mean, I don't know why people want to see, well, what's the performance gap between a person with more melanin in their skin than me and less melanin in their skin with me. I'd rather see it between that school and that school. Maybe we need to focus more effort over there. And just real quick to go back so we're clear on the law too, what we were talking about before with Mr. Chapman. It says public schools and Florida school system institutions shall develop and implement methods and strategies to increase the participation of students, race, gender, color, who have been traditionally underrepresented, including but not limited to mathematics, science, computer technology. I mean, every student in our, correct me if I'm wrong, but every student in our system, no matter what their skin color is, no matter what their gender is, has to take ELA. It's in our core, and they have to take math. So the idea that somehow they're underrepresented and that we have to break out these ELA scores by race, what this is referring to, and I had to think about it as we were going through this today, in programs, what they're getting at here is like career education. Are there welding? I don't know. Are there enough? Let's increase female welders or computer science or something like that. But to say that these races and genders are underrepresented, we have a core ELA program and a core math program that all students have to take. And so they're not underrepresented in that. This is referring to things like maybe trying to get more of those people into science, computer technology, and electronics. And that goes back to my point that when we start going down this road of race and gender, we take the focus off of, it has nothing to do with ELA scores, with law that we just read here about increasing program participation. And if people want to keep that chart, fine. If other people would like to see it, but it would have been more useful for me so that I have a bigger picture of like what parts of our community or which schools are struggling, not which races or genders are struggling, because I can't do anything with that information. I can't, and nor are we allowed to, according to state law, set up programs specifically based on race or gender. Now we can with ELL, but that's not race. That's just people that don't speak English. And then SWD students with disabilities, that has nothing to do with race and gender. So it would have been, I'm not sure why that chart was picked. It could have been more useful to have more local relevant information, not based on race and gender, and that's what I had to say on that.
By school, I agree.
Yeah, or by school or by a part of the community, I don't know, but anyway. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going on to 4 hours here, and we've got staff members that it's a Friday, they still got to go do work. Superintendent, let me ask you first. I would say the second half of this, which is operations, we move this to next Friday, unless you all have work to do, and it's a Friday and it's 2:00. That was great discussion on what we did, and I don't want to shorten this because there's other appointments you have to get to, and you guys got to close out your Friday. So I would like to push the second part of this, which is operations, to next Friday, and finish next Friday, so we can have a really good discussion. I mean, this was a great discussion on the academic side, and this is what we need with our strategic, where we're going and where we've been. And I don't want to shortchange that because, you know, we can't have another 45-minute an hour on this because you guys got to get to work, etc.
Sure.
I know you guys got other things to do besides hear us. We good with that?
Are you
Push it
saying,
back?
are
Push
you
it to
saying
Friday?
move this to the 3rd?
Yep, next Friday, just move the portion that we haven't covered yet, which is
We'll add it to
operation
one of
side.
the topics. We had
just add
other
it.
topics scheduled. We'll just.
What are the other topics that are scheduled?
I believe we have FSBA coming to, on that agenda.
Yep.
We also have impact fees,
All right.
and we have, there were
I think
three,
it's an audit.
the audit. So we can put the second, we can put the second part of this operation.
I mean, and we'll start at 9 o'clock next Friday. Too.
Correct.
We won't go into so far in the afternoon.
Yeah, I thank you for moving
Oh
it.
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It helps, so.
I don't want to shortchange us again on our strategic plan when it's 2 o'clock on a Friday and you guys got to go do work. Not that you're not working now, but you know what I mean.